The office, a place of routine, deadlines, and quiet productivity. But when the sun sets and the desks sit empty, shadows stretch, whispers linger, and the ordinary turns unsettling. Tonight, we bring you true horror stories from the workplace, accounts of eerie encounters, unexplained happenings, and the darkness that hides between the cubicles. So sit back, relax, and let the soothing sounds of nature accompany you as we step into the unknown. Welcome to True Office Horror Stories. The ghost in the printer. They say every office has its secrets. Files misfiled, whispers in the break room, maybe even a stapler that disappears and reappears days later. But here, in the dimly lit corners of the 15th floor, our secret is different. It lives inside the old HP laser jet printer, tucked against the far wall, and it's been trying to speak to us. I'm Leela, just another junior analyst trying to claw my way up the corporate ladder. My days are a blur of spreadsheets, endless deadlines, and the occasional passive-aggressive email from middle management. Nothing glamorous. But ever since I transferred to this department, something's been off. It's hard to explain. The office feels different, colder somehow, even when the AC isn't blasting. The air hangs heavier here, like it's carrying something no one wants to talk about. This morning was no exception. I was hunched over my desk, eyes glued to yet another report when the printer across the room started clicking. At first, I ignored it. Printers do that sometimes, right? But then the clicking grew louder, more insistent before the mechanical whirring kicked in. The sound pulled my focus like a needle dragged across glass. I glanced up, my eyes darting toward the corner where the printer sat. It was moving on its own, spitting out a single sheet. "Hey, did someone send something to the printer?" My voice came out more nervous than I'd intended. Mike, the guy in the cubicle nearest to me, didn't even look up. He just shrugged, earbuds firmly planted, nodding to some beat only he could hear. Typical. I hesitated for a moment, then stood. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound making me flinch. The walk to the printer felt longer than it should have, like the distance had stretched somehow. My pulse quickened with every step. When I reached the machine, the paper was already sliding out. I pulled it free, the crisp white page cool against my fingers. But the text stopped me cold. "Help me." They won't let me rest. The words weren't typed. No, they were scrawled in jagged, uneven letters, like someone had used their bare hands to press the ink onto the page. The edges of the text were smudged, streaks running down the paper as if trembling fingers had dragged through wet ink. I stood there, staring, my breath caught in my throat. My fingers felt damp against the page, and I realized I was gripping it too tightly. At first, I thought it was a prank, maybe one of Mike's lame attempts at humor. But as I stared at the paper, something about it felt desperate, alive. I turned, clutching the sheet as I scanned the room. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, their harsh glow casting long shadows across the rows of empty desks. Mike still hadn't moved, oblivious to everything outside his noise-canceling world. But me. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching, waiting. I whispered, barely audible, "Who needs help?" The room didn't answer. But the air around me felt heavier, colder, like it was pressing in from all sides. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a prank. Something was wrong here. Something was very, very wrong. The printer's message stuck with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I couldn't just ignore it. I had to know more. So there I was, hunched over a stack of dusty HR files in the back room, the stale smell of old paper and ink filling my nose. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the building's AC and the rustling of pages as I flipped through them, searching for, I didn't even know what. My hands brushed over a thin, yellowed folder. Something about it caught my eye. Emma Caldwell, I read aloud, the name unfamiliar but instantly heavy. The file was thin, barely a few pages, but the contents were enough to send a chill through me. She'd been an analyst like me, worked here 5 years ago, and then one day she was found dead, in the break room. Cause of death, undetermined, the report said. The words felt clinical, cold, like they were hiding something. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I flipped through the rest of the file. My mind raced. What happened to her? And why did the printer's message lead me to this? The overhead lights flickered, snapping me out of my thoughts. I froze. The flickering stopped, but the room felt different, charged like the air before a storm. And then I heard it, the low, mechanical hum of the printer starting up again. It was coming from the main office, its sound cutting through the stillness like a warning. I stepped out of the records room, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. My pulse quickened as I neared the printer, now churning out another sheet of paper. Emma! My voice wavered, barely above a whisper. Is that you, are you? Trying to tell me something? The printer stopped with a final click, spitting out the page. I picked it up slowly, my hands trembling. The words on the paper were stark and unmistakable. They knew, don't trust them. My heart dropped. They knew, I whispered to myself. Who? The room felt like it was closing in on me. My thoughts raced, paranoia creeping into every corner of my mind. Mike, with his earbuds and blank expressions, was he hiding something? The HR manager, who always seemed a little too eager to shut down questions. Or my boss. I clutched the paper tightly, the edges crumpling under my fingers. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. The printer stood silent now, but the air around it buzzed with an unseen energy. I felt exposed, like someone or something was watching. Emma, I whispered, my voice trembling. What did they know? What did they do to you? But the room remained silent, offering no answers. Only the heavy weight of the message in my hand and the growing fear that I might be next. It started small, just a name, Emma Caldwell, slipping into places where it didn't belong. Emails, reports, even whispers in the halls. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but the more I saw it, the more it seemed deliberate. A name I couldn't escape. Was I losing my mind? Or was Emma trying to show me something? The feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing day. My head was spinning, caught between the harsh reality of spreadsheets and the unsettling presence of her name everywhere. I couldn't focus. At night, sleep didn't bring relief. Instead, my dreams were filled with her, pale, gaunt, her eyes hollow, her skin almost translucent. She stood beside the printer, pointing toward the locked storage room at the end of the hall. Her finger was outstretched, demanding my attention. I woke up in a cold sweat, the image of her still vivid in my mind. I couldn't shake it. I knew I had to do something. It was late when I finally decided to sneak into the storage room after hours. The office was empty, a silence hanging over the building like a thick, suffocating blanket. The hallway was dark, lit only by the dim glow of emergency lights. My footsteps echoed as I made my way to the door, my heartbeat pounding in my ears, louder than any sound around me. I reached for the doorknob. My fingers trembled, but I forced myself to turn it. The door creaked open with a groan, as if it hadn't been touched in years. The sound rattled through the stillness, and for a moment I thought I'd wake the entire office. Inside, it was pitch black, but I could just make out the outlines of shelves and filing cabinets. I moved cautiously, the floorboards creaking beneath me with every step. My breath was shallow, the air heavy with dust and age. Then I saw it. A box, shredded documents stacked haphazardly, as though someone had tried to hide them in a hurry. My heart raced, but I couldn't stop myself. I pulled the box off the shelf, my fingers trembling as I began reassembling the torn pieces of paper. It took time, too much time as the minutes stretched on in the darkness. But slowly, the puzzle began to come together, and what I uncovered, embezzlement. A cover-up. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Emma had found out the truth. She had uncovered something they didn't want anyone to know. My hands shook as I read the documents. Names, dates, transactions, evidence that connected directly to Emma's death. They had silenced her before she could expose them. It wasn't an accident. I felt the weight of the truth pressing down on me, suffocating. Emma hadn't just died. Someone had made sure she never spoke again. I staggered backward, almost dropping the documents. My heart was racing, and the air felt thick with the realization. The room seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing longer. Emma's presence was so strong now, so undeniable. She had been trying to show me. She wanted justice. She needed me to finish what she started. But as I looked around the storage room, the oppressive silence closed in, and I knew this was far from over. The printer started again, but this time it wasn't the usual low hum. It was frantic. The sound of paper feeding through the machine grew louder, more urgent. Sheets flew out one after another, each one landing with a soft thud on the desk. I could barely keep up with the cascade of pages spilling from the printer, each one filled with more messages. Run! Danger! Trust no one. My hands trembled as I grabbed one of the pages. The words were scrawled in jagged, frantic letters, smeared ink pooling at the edges like someone had written them in a panic. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting into knots. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the messages. Was this it? Was I in danger? Then I heard them, footsteps. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the door. There he was, my boss, standing in the doorway with a cold, knowing smile on his face. "Late night, Leela." His voice was smooth, almost too calm. "You've been very curious lately, dangerous habit, that." I couldn't move, my body frozen in place. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything, but there was no time. The lights above flickered violently, buzzing and crackling with intensity. The hum of the printer stopped, but the air felt electric, charged with something dark. And then I saw her, Emma. Her translucent figure appeared behind my boss, floating like a wisp of smoke. She was pale, her features almost ghostly, and her eyes, those hollow eyes, locked on me for a split second before she reached out toward him. Her fingers hovered over his shoulder, and I could feel the temperature drop. The air went thick, heavy as if the whole office was holding its breath. I'll never forget the look on my boss's face. It was pure terror, his eyes wide with fear. For the briefest moment, he looked as if he was going to say something, but then she took him. Her hand gripped his shoulder, and without a sound, she dragged him into the shadows, her form vanishing as if she had never been there at all. The office went completely silent. No more buzzing lights, no more printing. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. The printer was still, the papers strewn about in disarray. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like something had shifted, like it had all been leading up to this moment. I was left alone, trembling. The warning signs were all there, but it was too late. Everything felt surreal, like I had just witnessed something I shouldn't have seen. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of stone. I slowly walked back to my desk, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The office felt so much colder now, as if Emma's presence still lingered. And there, on the printer, was one final sheet of paper. I didn't want to touch it, but I did. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. "Thank you." The words were simple, but they hit me harder than anything else I had seen. Emma's gone now, but every time I sit at my desk late at night, I can hear the faint hum of the printer stirring to life. It's quiet at first, a soft click, and then the whirring begins. And sometimes, just sometimes, I wonder who will it warn next. The red stapler. They say every cursed object has a story, an origin of malice or misfortune that lingers like a shadow. In our office, the story belonged to a simple red stapler. It sat on desks, innocent enough, until someone used it. Then the curse began. His name's Jason, just your typical office drone. Reports, emails, meetings that could have been emails. Yeah, you know the drill. My days blur together in a haze of clicking keyboards and the faint buzz of the overhead lights. It's not exciting, but I like it that way. Stability. Routine. Until that stapler landed on my desk. It started like any other day. I was sitting there, hunched over a pile of papers, the glow of my monitor making my eyes ache. My desk was its usual disaster, sticky notes everywhere, a coffee ring staining an overdue memo. That's when Beth appeared. She didn't knock or call my name, just slid the stapler onto my desk with a thud. I looked up, startled, as she stood there, her hand still resting on the cold metal. "Here," she said, her voice clipped. "Yours broke, right? Use this, just don't staple anything important with it, okay?" Her words hung in the air, strange and deliberate. I blinked, glancing down at the stapler. It was just a stapler. Sleek, black, a little scratched up. Nothing special. Thanks," I said, offering her an awkward chuckle. Beth didn't laugh, she didn't even smile. Her lips pressed together in a tight line, her eyes darting around like she was afraid someone might overhear us. Then she turned and walked away, quickly. I sat there, the stapler in front of me, her words replaying in my head. Don't staple anything important. What the hell did that mean? I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It felt solid, a little heavier than I expected. Normal enough. But there was something about Beth's tone, something sharp, almost nervous. My fingers tightened around the stapler as I stared at her retreating back. Her posture was stiff, her steps hurried, like she couldn't get away fast enough. I shook my head, chuckling softly to myself. A cursed stapler, seriously. Ridiculous. Still, as I set it back down on my desk, a chill ran through me, quick and fleeting, like someone had just whispered my name from across the room. I glanced over my shoulder. The office was as it always was, colleagues typing away, the printer humming faintly, the fluorescent lights casting their pale, steady glow. Normal. But as I looked back at the stapler, sitting there like it had always belonged, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Beth knew something I didn't. The first time I used it, I felt it. It was just a report, a routine task. I pressed the stapler down and click. The sound echoed, sharp and unnatural, bouncing off the walls like it didn't belong. Then the lights flickered. Not the usual quick buzz you shrug off. This was different, longer. The fluorescent bulbs dimmed, casting jagged shadows across the desks, their hum crackling like static. I froze, stapler in hand. A chill crept up my spine, slow and deliberate, like icy fingers tracing my vertebrae one by one. My breath hitched. The air felt thick, heavy, pressing down on me, making it hard to move. I told myself it was nothing. A coincidence. A weird glitch. But then, the accidents began. It started small. My coffee cup tipped over, spilling dark liquid across my desk and onto an important report. My computer crashed the next day, the screen flashing a garbled mess of static before shutting off completely. And then the files, whole folders, started disappearing. At first, I thought it was just stress. Long hours, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. But it wasn't just me. I saw things. Shadows moving in my periphery, darting between cubicles when I turned my head. Shapes that shouldn't be there, stretching across the walls. The worst was the whispers. Low and indistinct, they echoed in the break room when I was alone, brushing against my ears like someone leaning in too close. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Late one night, I found myself in HR's archive room. The place was a maze of old files, cabinets groaning under the weight of years of paperwork. The fluorescent light overhead flickered as I dug through the drawers, the sharp rustle of papers breaking the oppressive silence. I don't know what I was looking for. A reason. A pattern. Something to explain the growing weight in my chest every time I sat at my desk. And then I found it. An old report dated years ago. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink faded but still legible. Mark Henderson. His name jumped out at me, dead in his cubicle. Cause of death, heart attack. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I flipped through the file. Attached to the final report, stapled hastily to the corner, was a single sheet of lined paper. A witness statement. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, the kind of writing that comes from a hand shaking with fear. The words sent a shiver down my spine. The stapler. It's cursed. It's watching. My breath caught. The air in the room felt colder, suffocating. My hands gripped the edges of the file, my knuckles white, and then I heard it. A click. The sound of a stapler, sharp and deliberate, echoed from somewhere in the empty office. My chest tightened, my heart pounding so loud it felt like it would burst. Slowly, I turned my head toward the sound. The rows of desks stretched out in the darkness, empty and still. But I felt it, that same oppressive weight, that same watching presence. It wasn't just in my head. I couldn't escape it. I tried. I really did. I'd walk in every morning, my heart already hammering in my chest, and there it would be. The stapler. Sitting innocently on my desk, like it belonged there, like it had always been there. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to, but it didn't matter. It reappeared every single morning, no matter how far I shoved it to the edge of the desk, no matter how many times I tried to hide it in the drawer. Every day, I started seeing things. It was subtle at first, a flicker of red, like an angry glow in the corner of my vision. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of a computer screen, but no, it wasn't. I'd blink and the red would linger. It would pulse, faint but insistent, like a warning or a countdown. And then the stapler, I'd find papers stapled together. They weren't mine. The messages written on them weren't my handwriting. Leave. It's too late. I stared at the words, my pulse racing in my throat. They burned into my mind, leaving me gasping for air. Was it real? Was this happening? Or was I just losing my mind? I couldn't tell anymore. The office was no help. My coworkers avoided my gaze, their eyes flickering to the stapler, to me, and then quickly away. They didn't speak, but I saw it in their eyes. Pity, fear. They knew something, but they wouldn't say a word. Then it happened again, this time in my sleep. I wasn't ready for it. The dream started with an emptiness, a void so cold it felt like it was swallowing me whole. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, trapped in this dark place. And then I saw him. Mark Henderson. He looked different, wrong. His skin was pale, too pale, stretched tight over his gaunt face. His eyes were sunken, hollow, and his hands, his fingers were covered in ink. No, not just ink, blood. He reached out toward me, his hand trembling, and whispered, his voice a rasp that made my skin crawl. "It's bound to the stapler," he said. "A curse of greed and power. It won't stop until it's fed." The words felt like a weight crushing my chest, suffocating me, and I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I reached for him, but he was already fading, vanishing into the blackness, leaving only the echo of his voice behind. And then I woke up. I sat up in bed, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. My heart was racing, my body trembling, the remnants of the dream lingering in the corners of my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. And then I saw it. The stapler, sitting on my nightstand. It wasn't there when I went to sleep. I was sure of it. But now it was just sitting there, innocent, waiting for me. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, but I knew it wasn't over. I couldn't take it anymore. It had to end. I had to end it. The office was silent, too silent, like the whole building was holding its breath. The usual hum of the air conditioning was gone, replaced by a heaviness in the air, thick and suffocating. The lights above flickered violently, casting strobe-like flashes across the room, making everything feel like it was splitting in two. There on my desk was the stapler. I stood in front of it, heart pounding so loud in my ears I thought it might burst. The stapler sat there, innocent, like it hadn't just dragged me into this nightmare. I clenched it in my hand, holding it over the shredder, my breath shallow and fast. "Is this what you want?" "Huh," I whispered, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The stapler burned in my hand, glowing red-hot like it was alive. The heat radiated from it, searing my palm, but I couldn't let go. I could barely breathe. And then, the room exploded into chaos. Papers flew from the desks, swirling violently in the air like they were alive, like they were being controlled by something far more powerful than just me. The sound of them tearing through the air was deafening, a rush of paper and wind that made my chest tighten. And then I saw them. The shadows in the corners of the room, no, not shadows, figures, ghostly, hollow figures that drifted from the darkness. Their eyes, empty, dark holes staring right at me, watching, always watching. I screamed. It was a sound that felt like it came from someone else, like I wasn't even me anymore. The fear was overwhelming, suffocating, like it was eating me from the inside out. This wasn't just a curse. It was alive, feeding on fear, on desperation, and I had given it everything it needed. The air grew heavier, more oppressive, until I could barely stand. My legs gave way beneath me. I collapsed, crumpling to the floor, the world spinning around me like I was trapped in some kind of storm. And then, silence. I don't know how long I was there. It could have been minutes, hours, maybe longer. But when I finally opened my eyes, I saw it. The stapler. Still there, pristine, sitting on my desk like nothing had happened. Like it hadn't just destroyed everything. Like it hadn't fed on me. But the worst part was when the door to the office creaked open. A new employee walked in, bright and cheerful. A young man, probably fresh out of school. "Oh, cool, a stapler," he said, grinning as he picked it up, completely oblivious. "I needed one of these." His voice was like a nail scraping down a chalkboard, but I couldn't move. I just stared, my breath catching in my throat. In the background, my chair stood empty. It felt like it was watching me, waiting for me to come back. But I wasn't coming back, not ever again. And as everything faded to black, I realized the stapler was just the beginning. The 13th floor. Every office has its secrets. Locked doors, empty meeting rooms, floors that don't seem to exist. But when you work late, you start to notice things that don't add up. That's how I found the 13th floor. Call me Mia, a young and overworked project manager whipping my ass into productivity shape for the corporate gods just like you. I wasn't supposed to be here this late, but the client wanted changes and my manager wanted them yesterday. Typical, right? I could feel the exhaustion settling into my bones, each minute dragging more than the last. But here I am, hunched over my desk, working through another endless revision. I stand up to stretch, trying to shake off the stiffness in my back. As I do, the lights flicker briefly, just a quick flash. Nothing unusual, really. But it makes me pause. I glance around the office, the silence wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. The space is empty, just me and the hum of my computer. I feel it, an unease creeping up my spine. Just my imagination, I mutter to myself, trying to brush it off. Maybe it's just the building's ancient wiring, the old buzz of the lights playing tricks on my brain. I shake my head, determined to focus. Coffee, that's what I need. I start walking toward the break room, the familiar rhythm of my footsteps echoing off the walls. But then I hear it, the elevator chime. It's soft at first, distant, like a warning bell. I turn, my heart skipping a beat. The elevator doors are wide open, and yet there's no one inside. The cab is empty, eerily so, just the dull interior lights casting long shadows across the polished floor. A faint breeze brushes past me as if something just moved, though there's no open window, no reason for it. I feel a shiver crawl down my neck. That's when I first noticed something strange. The elevator. It shouldn't have been running this late. No one else is here. No one left to call it. And yet there it is, waiting as if expecting something or someone to step inside. I stand there, frozen for a moment, trying to convince myself it's nothing. But my gut tells me otherwise. There's something wrong. And for the first time, I don't want to be alone in this office anymore. I don't know what possessed me to step into the elevator. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe just the eerie silence of the office, but there I was. The doors slid shut behind me with a soft whoosh, and for a moment I felt the weight of the building's stillness settle around me. But then I noticed it, the button for the 13th floor, faintly glowing in the dim light. It shouldn't have been glowing. It shouldn't have even been there. I hesitated. I've worked here for 3 years, and I knew the building like the back of my hand. But in all that time, I'd never seen a 13th floor. Most buildings skip it entirely, some superstition, some kind of corporate safety measure. Yet here it was, glowing like it was waiting for me. The air felt thicker now, heavier, like the room had become a vacuum around me. I reached out, my fingers hovering over the button for a second longer than I should have before pressing it. The elevator jerked to life, the faint hum of the cables groaning as it began its descent. I stood still, watching the numbers above the doors drop. 11, 12, and then, just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, the elevator stopped with a sudden jolt. I wasn't prepared for that, and my stomach lurched with the force of it. The doors slid open, and I was hit with a wave of stale, musty air. The hallway before me was dimly lit, the kind of dim that makes you feel like something is just out of sight, watching. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting long, sickly shadows across the floor. The air was thick, heavy with an unnatural hum that vibrated under my skin, and my eyes immediately darted to the scattered papers on the ground, as if someone had hastily left in a panic. I stepped out into the hallway, my breath catching in my chest. It felt wrong in a way that I couldn't put into words. "Hello, anyone here?" I called out, but my voice echoed back to me, distorted as though the hallway itself was swallowing the sound. I turned, my heart thumping in my chest as I tried to find my way back. The elevator doors had already closed behind me, and I reached out to press the button to call it back. But when my hand touched the panel, my stomach dropped. The buttons were gone. The panel was blank. No lights, no buttons, just a flat, featureless surface where the buttons should have been. That's when it hit me. I wasn't supposed to be here. And whatever was in this building, whatever this place was, it wasn't just a part of the office. It was something else entirely, and I had just stepped right into it. I step cautiously into the hallway, the air colder here, somehow more suffocating. The lights flicker overhead, and I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck prickle with an unsettling sense of wrongness. This floor, it's identical to mine, or at least it should be, but everything feels off, like it's just a hollow version of reality. The desks are all empty. Not a soul in sight. The monitors are on, but they're displaying nothing but static, white noise buzzing from each screen. The smell, there's this metallic scent that hangs in the air, thick and oppressive, as though something's been spilled here, soaked into the very walls. I try to push it away, but it's impossible. Every breath feels heavier than the last. I keep walking, drawn to the familiar sight of a desk. The nameplate catches my eye, Sarah T. I don't know why I'm drawn to it, but I find myself standing at the edge of her desk. The computer on it flickers to life on its own, the screen flashing before settling on a series of documents. My fingers hesitate over the mouse, but I can't stop myself from scrolling. My heart drops as I read the names. I recognize some of them. Faces of coworkers, names of people who have come and gone over the years, people who vanished without warning. People who just stopped showing up one day like they'd never existed. There's one common thread, one thing that ties them all together. They worked late. Just like me. Just like I've been doing tonight. I swallow hard, my stomach twisting as the weight of what I'm seeing begins to sink in. Before I can process anymore, I hear it, the soft, faint whispers. They're coming from somewhere farther down the hallway, distant but growing louder. I freeze, every muscle in my body tensed, my breath shallow. The whispers seem to pull me forward like a magnetic force. Against my better judgment, I follow the sound, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I reach the end of the hallway and stop in front of a door, its label reading simply, "Records." The door creaks open and I step inside. The air here is thicker, the silence more intense. My eyes scan the room and my breath catches in my throat. Files are piled high on a desk, each one labeled in scrawling, hurried handwriting. I pull one open. Inside, I find page after page of reports detailing bizarre time distortions on the 13th floor. I can feel the temperature in the room drop, the hairs on my arms standing up. My heartbeat quickens as I flip through the documents, each one stranger than the last. And then it happens, those whispers. They're louder now, distorted, more insistent. They're coming from all around me, calling my name. "Mia!" The sound wraps around me, clawing at my senses. My head spins. This can't be real. It's just a bad dream. I whisper the words as if saying them will make it true, but they taste hollow in my mouth. The walls close in. The whispers are all around me, and now I'm not sure if I can tell where the voice ends and my own fear begins. The lights flicker violently above me, and for a split second, I wonder if they're going to burn out completely. I have to find the elevator. I have to. Every second spent here feels like I'm sinking deeper into something I can't escape. The hallway in front of me seems to stretch on forever, an endless void that mocks my every movement. Shadows flit across my vision, moving just out of reach, like they're waiting for something or someone. My breath catches, and I force myself to keep walking, even though the air feels thick with dread. I stumble into a meeting room, desperate for any escape, but the moment I step inside, I freeze. Time seems to warp around me. The clock on the wall is spinning uncontrollably backwards. I blink, convinced my eyes are playing tricks on me, but it keeps going, the hands spinning faster and faster. Time doesn't mean anything here. Seconds feel like hours, and every step I take forward just seems to pull me further from the exit, from the world I know. I back away, my chest tight, and that's when I see it. On the whiteboard in front of me, the words start to form, slow at first, then fast, written in something dark and red, blood red. The message is simple, but it makes my stomach drop. "You've seen too much." My skin crawls. I can feel the weight of those words hanging in the air, pressing down on me. I try to move, try to run, but I'm not sure where to go. The shadows in the corners of the room seem to be shifting, undulating, coalescing into something, someone. I stare at the figure, my breath quickening. Its face is featureless, just a blank void where eyes should be. Its body flickers like a broken television screen, static crackling in the air around it. And then it points at me. I can't breathe. I can't move. My legs give way and I collapse to the floor, terror flooding my chest. My heart races, thumping in my ears as the figure's distorted whisper reaches my ears. "Stay!" The word rips through me, a command, a promise of something I don't want to understand. And then screams. My own voice, but it's not enough to drown out the cold grip of fear that's overtaking me. The world around me blurs and everything goes black. I wake with a jolt, the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights above me pulling me from a dreamless sleep. My head aches as I push myself upright, blinking against the sudden brightness of the morning sun streaming through the windows. The office is just as I left it, and yet it feels different. I'm disoriented, like I've been asleep for far too long, trapped in a nightmare I can't remember. I hear the soft chatter of my coworkers around me, their voices distant and muffled as if I'm underwater. None of them seem to notice me yet. One of them, Claire, laughs lightly as she passes by, stopping at my desk. "Burning the midnight oil again, huh? You should really take a break," she says, a teasing tone in her voice. I nod absently, trying to focus, but my eyes can't stop drifting toward the elevator in the far corner. The same elevator. The one that led me to the 13th floor, to that place. For a moment I see it, just a flicker, but it's enough to make my heart stop. The 13 button, glowing faintly before it flickers out like it knows I'm watching, like it's waiting for me. I swallow hard, my hands trembling as I grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. The panic rises in my chest, threatening to choke me. I thought I had escaped. I thought it was over. But now I see it everywhere. The clock on my desk ticks backward, the second hand jerking in fits like time itself is mocking me. The shadows, they don't belong here. They move too fast, too deliberately. It's like they're following me, waiting for me to slip up. And every night when the office is empty, I hear it, the soft chime of the elevator. I know it's waiting for me to return. The thing that lures me back, no matter how hard I try to forget. I glance at my reflection in the computer screen, trying to steady my breathing, but what I see makes my blood run cold. Behind me, in the corner of the room, it's there. The shadowy figure. It's just standing there, watching me, its form flickering in and out of existence like it's not entirely real. But I know it is. I know it's been waiting for me. And then, faint but unmistakable, a whisper echoes in my mind. You can't leave. The night shift entity. They say the office is a place for ambition, for dreams and progress. But when the sun sets and the clocks hit midnight, it becomes something else entirely. I never believed the stories about the whispers until I heard them myself. I was the new hire, trying to prove myself. Staying late was my way of showing commitment. But as the hours stretched on, I realized the late shift wasn't for the faint of heart. It wasn't just the quiet, it was something deeper. The emptiness. It was like the building itself was watching me. I glance at my desk. A chaotic mess of half-drunk coffee cups, sticky notes, and a half-eaten sandwich. My phone buzzes in the silence. It's a text from my manager. Thanks for staying late again. I sigh, rub my temples, and force my eyes back to the screen, my fingers moving mechanically over the keyboard. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights above is the only sound filling the space. Until suddenly, a faint whisper echoes from behind me, coming from the darkened cubicles. I freeze. My breath catches in my throat as I slowly turn toward the sound. Hello! My voice trembles, barely more than a whisper. Is someone there? Nothing. Just the silent rows of cubicles, empty and still like the whole floor is holding its breath. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I can almost feel the weight of unseen eyes on me. But there's nothing. No one, just the quiet. Too quiet. The whispers started out faint, almost like a trick of the mind. At first, I thought it was just stress, exhaustion, maybe both. But the more the nights dragged on, the louder they became. It wasn't just the whispers. Things started happening that I couldn't ignore. Papers shifted across my desk when no one was around, their edges tapping against the wood in a rhythmic, unsettling dance. Chairs, always slightly out of place when I looked back at them. A slight angle, a nudge like they were waiting for me to notice. And the whispers, they always called my name. Mira! It was soft at first, barely a breath, but now it felt like they were right behind me. Calling. One night I crouched down to grab a pen I dropped under my desk. My fingers brushed against something crumpled. I pulled it out, a note, hastily scribbled. My heart dropped as I read the words. Get out while you can. My breath hitched. Panic surged up my throat, and I glanced around, half expecting someone to be standing in the shadows, watching me. Who wrote this? What is going on? My voice shook, barely a whisper, swallowed up by the suffocating silence of the office. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I grabbed my phone, checked the security footage. But all I found was static. The cameras, dead during the times I heard the whispers. My skin prickled with unease as I stood there, the flickering black-and-white images of empty hallways stretching before me like a nightmare. I couldn't let it go. I needed answers. My hands trembled as I rifled through old HR files, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. And that's when I found them, reports. Missing employees, all from late shifts. It was like they had vanished into thin air. No resolutions, no explanations, just names, dates, and the chilling silence that followed. I leaned back in my chair, the note still clenched in my fist. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were a warning that I was too deep in and I couldn't escape. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not my manager, who always pushed me to stay late, not the janitor who would avoid my eyes whenever I mentioned the whispers. I couldn't even trust myself. I could feel it, something was wrong. My skin crawled, my mind fractured with each passing night. I was jumpy, on edge, sleep-deprived, and I couldn't tell if I was losing my sanity or if something was really happening. I stared at my screen, hoping the dull glow would anchor me, but the reflection of my face seemed to shift. Shadows danced at the edges, figures that weren't there when I turned to face them. My heart thudded in my chest as I twisted around in my chair, eyes scanning the empty room. Nothing. Just the flickering light above me, buzzing with a strange urgency. Then I heard it again. Clearer, louder. "Help us!" The words scraped against my ears, sending chills down my spine. My breath caught in my throat. "Don't let it take you." I was paralyzed, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What was this? What the hell was happening? I had to know, I had to confront them. I stormed into my manager's office, every step echoing like a hammer in my ears. He was sitting at his desk, looking at me like I was the one with the problem. "You knew," I snapped, my voice shaking but fierce. "You knew people were disappearing, didn't you?" He flinched, his eyes darting to the door like he was looking for an escape. "Mira, you need to calm down. You're just overworked." Just overworked. The words made my blood boil. My hands clenched into fists as I turned on my heel, ready to leave before I did something I'd regret. But then I saw it. At the far end of the room, by an empty cubicle, there was a figure. Barely there, just an outline, a shadow that shouldn't have been. Its head tilted toward me, slow and deliberate, like it was studying me. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. It was impossible. Yet there it was. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever was happening here, whatever was watching me, it wasn't just in my head. I had to know the truth. I couldn't leave without answers, even if it meant staying one final night. So, armed with nothing but a flashlight, I ventured deeper into the office, my heart pounding in my chest, my every step echoing like a drumbeat in the hollow silence. The air was thick with tension, pressing against my skin like a weight I could barely breathe through. The whispers, they were no longer just whispers. They had changed. They were warnings, sharp and frantic, urging me to turn back, to leave this place before it was too late. But it was too late for that now. I had to see this through, even if it cost me everything. The lights overhead flickered violently, their buzzing growing erratic, as if they, too, were desperate to escape. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a horrifying sight. Claw marks, deep and jagged, etched into the desks. They looked like they had been carved by something powerful, something hungry. My breath caught in my throat, but the worst part was the whispers. They were rising, swelling, becoming screams, desperate and pleading. I spun around, my pulse racing, but that's when I saw it. The entity. A shadow. No, it wasn't just a shadow. It was alive. Amorphous, like it could shift with every blink, but there were those eyes. Glowing, unblinking, and fixed on me as though it knew me, as though it had been waiting for me. I didn't think, I couldn't. It lunged toward me, fast and silent. My body froze, paralyzed by fear. But then instinct kicked in. I sprinted for the nearest door, heart hammering in my chest. I slammed it shut behind me, the supply closet. It felt like the flimsiest shelter, but it was all I had. I locked the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the handle. Inside, I took a few ragged breaths, my head spinning. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I scanned the shelves. That's when I saw them. Journals, piled high, hidden beneath a layer of dust. I grabbed one, flipping through the pages, my eyes scanning the frantic scrawl. Each journal described the same thing: the whispers, the disappearances, the same horrifying entity that had been stalking this office for years. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from the realization. The entity was not bound by walls. It wasn't stopped by light. It was everywhere. And now, it was coming for me too. I ran. I didn't stop until I was out of the building, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my heart pounding in my chest. I swore I'd never set foot in that place again. The cold night air felt like freedom, like a release from the suffocating grip of whatever had been hunting me. I got into my car, slamming the door behind me, the engine roaring to life as I sped away from the office. The streetlights flickered past, too fast, as I tried to push the image of that creature from my mind. I had to leave it behind. I had to. But then my phone buzzed, jolting me out of my thoughts. I glanced down, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. It was a text from my manager. "Thanks for staying late again." A chill ran through me. How did he know? I tightened my grip on the wheel, my mind racing. No, I wasn't going back. I couldn't, but the words. They felt wrong, like a reminder that I hadn't really escaped. The rest of the drive felt like a blur, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see that glowing figure trailing behind me. But nothing. The roads were empty, just me and the sound of my racing thoughts. When I finally reached home, I locked every door, bolted every window, and sank onto the couch, trying to steady my breathing. The weight of exhaustion hit me like a wave, but there was no comfort in the silence of my apartment. I glanced at my phone, still lying on the counter, the screen dark and unmoving. But then it lit up. I froze. The words appeared like they were etched into the screen, glowing with a sickly intensity. "Help!" My stomach churned, and I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't breathe. My whole body trembled as I reached for the phone, but before I could touch it, the screen flickered and the words disappeared. I stared at the blank screen, my heart pounding in my ears, the silence pressing in around me. But in the back of my mind, I could still hear them. The whispers. The screen cut to black. And somewhere, deep in the quiet, I could still hear them growing louder. "Help us!" Office poltergeist. Every office has its quirks: broken printers, passive-aggressive post-it notes, and the faint smell of burnt coffee. But in this office, quirks aren't just nuisances. They are warnings. I didn't realize it until I stayed late one night and saw the messages for myself. I wasn't supposed to stay late. I mean, who willingly sacrifices their evening to this fluorescent-lit prison? But deadlines don't care about your plans. Just one night, I told myself. One night to catch up. The office was eerily quiet, save for the rhythmic clacking of my fingers on the keyboard. The hum of the air conditioner filled the void, steady and monotonous. Then I heard it. A soft scrape, like something sliding across a surface. I froze mid-typing, the sound echoing louder in the oppressive silence. Slowly, I turned my head. A stapler. My stapler had moved, now resting on the edge of the desk behind me. "Hello!" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the office. Nothing, just silence, deep and impenetrable. I shook my head, trying to laugh at myself. Overworked paranoia, I thought. I turned back to my screen, dismissing it as the building settling or a gust from the air vents. But then my desk lamp flickered. Once, twice. The hairs on my arms stood at attention. And that's when it happened. A single sheet of paper drifted to the floor as if nudged by an invisible hand. The sound of its faint landing cut through the quiet like a whisper. I leaned down, my fingers trembling slightly as I picked it up. At first glance, it was blank. But as I tilted it under the flickering light, faint indentations caught my eye. Words, pressed into the page as though from within. "Leave now." I let out a short, nervous laugh, the sound brittle in the empty room. "A draft, maybe," I muttered to myself, but no breeze stirred the air. The words felt unnatural. It wasn't just the message, it was how the letters looked. Like they'd been punched into the paper from some unseen force, as if the warning wasn't written on it but born inside it. My heart raced. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but a weight settled in my chest. A heavy, suffocating presence that I couldn't shake. I wasn't alone. I noticed it first with the pens. I was typing away, trying to ignore the creeping unease that had been building all night when my eyes caught something strange on my desk. The pens, ones I distinctly remembered leaving scattered, were now lined up in a neat arrow, pointing toward the far end of the office. I frowned, glancing around. The room was empty, as always this late. The only sound was the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights above and the hum of the air conditioner. Then I saw the sticky notes. Bright yellow squares, each meticulously placed, spelling out a single word: run. I let out a nervous laugh, though it felt more like a reflex than anything genuine. "Okay, funny," I muttered, standing up and scanning the room. "Who's messing with me?" But there was no one. Just the same empty rows of desks and the faint hum of the office machines. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. My pulse quickened as I looked at the sticky notes again. They seemed deliberate, purposeful. Then it hit me, the cleaning crew, maybe they were playing a prank? But no, the cleaners never came this late. A chill crept up my spine. My eyes followed the direction of the arrow. It led to an old filing cabinet in the corner, one I'd never bothered to use. The cabinet looked ancient, its metal surface scratched and dented with years of neglect. Against my better judgment, I walked toward it. Each step felt heavier than the last, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. When I reached the cabinet, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the drawer handle, fingers trembling slightly. The silence around me felt suffocating, pressing in from all sides. Finally, I pulled it open. Inside was a single folder. Its label, scrawled in faded ink, read, "Incidents." I flipped it open, the brittle pages crackling in my hands. The first report described desks rearranged overnight. Another mentioned employees who'd gone missing without a trace. And then there were the messages, cryptic, chilling warnings scribbled or printed in impossible ways. One report stood out. It ended with a single line, "Last known location, meeting room B." I swallowed hard, the room suddenly feeling colder. That's when the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The flickering grew faster, casting disjointed shadows across the walls. The hum of the photocopier in the corner became louder, its rhythm erratic, almost frantic. "What the hell is going on here?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the growing din. But no answer came. Just the oppressive hum of the office and the weight of something I couldn't see, lurking just out of sight. The shadows were moving again. I could see them in the corners of my eyes, flickers of darkness that danced just out of focus. Every time I turned my head, there was nothing there, but the feeling was suffocating. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. My breathing was shallow, rapid, as though the walls of the office were closing in around me. The messages on the sticky notes had changed, no longer vague warnings. Now they screamed at me, "Stop digging. You're next." My throat felt tight as I read the words over and over as if they were branded into my brain. I told myself it couldn't be real, but the tension in the air said otherwise. Every sound felt amplified. The faint hum of the lights buzzed in my skull like an electric swarm. My footsteps on the tiled floor echoed too loudly, as if the building were mocking me with its emptiness. I decided I had to leave. I couldn't stay here, not another second. But when I hit the elevator button, nothing happened. The display didn't even light up. I jabbed it again, harder this time. Still nothing. "Come on," I muttered, my voice shaking. I turned to the stairwell. The metal door loomed in front of me like a lifeline. But when I grabbed the handle and twisted, it wouldn't budge. Locked. A wave of panic surged through me. I pounded on the door, the sound reverberating through the empty office. "Hey, is anyone there?" Silence. I was trapped. My legs felt weak as I stumbled back toward my desk. My eyes kept darting to the filing cabinet. Something about it called to me like an itch I couldn't ignore. With trembling hands, I yanked the drawer open again and rifled through the folder. A photograph slipped out, its edges frayed and worn. The image showed a woman standing by my desk, a former employee, judging by her dated office attire. Scribbled across the photo in angry, jagged letters were the words, "She knew." "Knew what?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. My hands shook as I held the photo closer. What did she know? The room seemed to pulse around me, the fluorescent lights flickering like a heartbeat. Then the photocopier roared to life. The sudden noise made me jump, my pulse hammering in my ears. The machine's mechanical groans filled the air as it spit out a single sheet of paper. I didn't want to pick it up. Every instinct screamed at me to leave it alone, but I couldn't stop myself. With hesitant fingers, I lifted the page. Stamped across it in bold, black letters were two words, Meeting Room B. My hands went cold, the paper slipping slightly from my grasp. The shadows in the room felt closer now, like they were leaning in, waiting. And for the first time that night, I realized I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. I didn't want to go in. The door to Meeting Room B stood ajar, just enough to let me see inside. The air around it felt wrong, thicker somehow, like stepping into a place I wasn't supposed to be. But I couldn't stop myself. As I stepped inside, an unnatural chill wrapped around me, sinking into my skin. The air was heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. My own breathing was shallow, and every exhale hung visibly in the icy air. The scene was wrong. Objects were stacked haphazardly on the table and chairs, staplers, folders, even coffee mugs, all forming strange, cryptic symbols. I didn't recognize any of them, but they felt deliberate, purposeful. The walls seemed to close in, their shadows shifting unnaturally under the dim light. It felt like the room was alive, watching me, breathing with me. My legs screamed at me to run, but something rooted me in place. Something unseen but undeniably present. Then I saw it. On the whiteboard, written in jagged, almost angry strokes, were the words, "IT wasn't an accident." A shiver ran down my spine and my stomach churned. I didn't want to know what it meant, but my eyes were drawn to the pile of documents on the table beneath the board. My trembling hands reached out and I flipped through the pages. Sarah's name was everywhere. Reports, statements, timelines, they all detailed her death, a fall from the office window. It was labeled an accident. A tragic mishap, but the documents told a different story. Foul play, witness inconsistencies, notes scribbled in the margins questioning the truth. I couldn't breathe. The sound of the door slamming shut behind me snapped me back. I spun around, heart pounding, but the room was pitch black now. The dim light that had flickered above me was gone, swallowed by the darkness. "Hello," my voice cracked, barely a whisper. The only light came from my phone in my pocket. My shaking hands fumbled to pull it out. As the screen came to life, a text popped up, bright and glaring in the oppressive darkness. "Look behind you." My blood turned to ice. My grip on the phone faltered, and it almost slipped from my hands. I didn't want to look. Every fiber of my being screamed not to, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I turned. A shadow loomed over me, tall, unnatural, its edges flickering like smoke in the dim glow of my phone. My knees buckled, and I stumbled backward, pressing myself against the cold wall. It leaned in close. Close enough that I could feel its presence pressing against me like a weight. My breath hitched as it whispered a single word. "Sarah." The sound was barely audible, more like a hiss than a voice. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure melted into the darkness, leaving me alone. Or so I thought. The room felt alive again, watching, waiting, and I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The first rays of dawn spilled over the horizon as I stumbled out of the office, my legs weak and trembling. The cold morning air hit me like a slap, but it wasn't enough to shake the images from my mind. The whispers, the shadows, the suffocating presence that seemed to cling to my skin, even now. I couldn't stop shaking. My hands clutched my bag like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I didn't look back. Not at the building, not at the windows, not at the shadows that might still be watching me. I drove straight home, though I don't remember the drive. The entire time, my mind raced, replaying everything that had happened. The messages. Sarah, that thing in the darkness. By mid-afternoon, I'd typed up my resignation. My hands were still unsteady as I pressed send. The email, a hastily written escape plan. I didn't care about explanations or notice periods. I just wanted out. Whatever that place was, it wasn't worth my sanity. I told myself it was over, but it wasn't. That night, I woke up in a cold sweat. The apartment was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock on my nightstand. My heart was racing, but I didn't know why. Then I saw it, my desk chair. It was turned toward my bed. I stared at it, my breath caught in my throat. I hadn't left it like that, I was certain. And on the seat, a note rested. The paper was folded neatly, too perfectly, as if placed there with care. I didn't want to touch it. My body screamed at me to stay in bed, to ignore it. But curiosity, or maybe something else, drove me. I reached out with trembling hands, unfolding the note. 3 words stared back at me, written in the same jagged, angry script I'd seen on the office whiteboard. It's not over. My blood ran cold. I shot out of bed, frantically scanning the room. The shadows felt heavier, the air thicker. I was alone, or at least I wanted to believe I was. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was just exhaustion, my imagination playing cruel tricks. But deep down, I knew the truth. I avoided my desk for the rest of the day, keeping my distance as though it might lash out. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the couch, trying to distract myself with the soft glow of the television. But something caught my eye. Movement. I turned my head, heart pounding. Papers on my desk. They were shifting, sliding across the surface as if guided by invisible hands. Slowly, deliberately, they formed a single word. Stay. I couldn't breathe. The room felt heavy, oppressive, as though it was leaning in on me. Then, as I stared, frozen in terror, the lights in my apartment flickered. The screen on the television cut to black, plunging the room into an eerie silence. And then I heard it. A whisper, faint but unmistakable, curling through the darkness like smoke. "You can't leave!" The sound was enough to snap me back. I bolted from the apartment, leaving everything behind. But even as I ran, one thought clung to me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. It wasn't over. It would never be over. Ghost in the elevator, floor 13. The building was supposed to be modern, sleek, and efficient, a corporate hub for ambitious people who climbed the ladder. Yet there was something unsettling about the elevator. No one seemed to question its oddity at first, but I couldn't ignore it. Every time I pressed the button for the 12th floor, the elevator would stop at the 13th. Except there was no 13th floor. At least, not on any of the blueprints. It wasn't supposed to exist. I had been working late again, just like every other night, exhausted, hungry, and half distracted. Maybe that's why I didn't notice it at first. But as I started to pay closer attention, I realized something darker was at play, something I was too afraid to acknowledge. My name is Claire, and I'm no different from anyone else trying to make it in a city that never sleeps. I moved here last year to escape my past, trying to build a future on my own terms. But I've always been someone who struggles with self-doubt, plagued by moments of fear. And it was during those moments, when my mind was at its weakest, that the elevator's strange behavior began. I thought it was nothing more than a quirk, a malfunction. But my discomfort grew into something more as I realized I was becoming obsessed with it. I couldn't stop thinking about the 13th floor, even though I couldn't find a single piece of evidence that it was supposed to be there. It was a typical evening in the office. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead. The faint smell of stale coffee and printer ink lingered in the air. But that wasn't what got to me. It was the cold drafts, the feeling of being watched. Every time I walked toward the elevator, the temperature seemed to drop a degree. And then, as I pressed the button for the ground floor, the elevator would lurch slightly, and the number 13 would flash on the digital display. Every single time. It was like a silent invitation. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion. After all, who wouldn't be a little paranoid when you're working alone at night? But the more it happened, the more I began to dread stepping into the elevator. I'd press the button to the ground floor, the doors would close, and I'd wait. The elevator would start moving, then stop. At the 13th floor. At first, I tried to ignore it, but then I tried to get off the elevator when it stopped. The doors wouldn't open, not at the 13th floor. I tried every button, every combination of buttons. The doors would not budge. My heart would race as the elevator hummed with an ominous energy. I tried asking my colleagues about it. Some looked at me like I was crazy. "What 13th floor?" they'd ask. Others said they'd noticed it but dismissed it. I began researching the building's history. That's when I found the first clue, a dusty old real estate brochure I discovered hidden behind a filing cabinet. The building was originally slated to have 12 floors, but a fire had consumed a portion of it before it could be finished. In the place of the 13th floor was a basement, one that no one had access to. At least, that's what the brochure said. Something didn't sit right. There was no record of the fire. No mention of the basement, and no mention of the floor that wasn't supposed to exist. The more I dug, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Was it the stress? Was I imagining it all? My mind replayed the sensation of the elevator stopping, of something watching me from beyond those thick steel doors. But the worst part was the feeling that something was changing within me. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I was becoming someone else. One night, I decided I wouldn't take the elevator. I'd walk the stairs, anything to avoid the growing sense of dread. But as I passed the elevator, it opened on its own. The lights inside flickered, and the number 13 lit up again. But this time, I saw someone. A shadowy figure stood at the back of the elevator. Its face was obscured, but its presence was unmistakable. As I stepped back in fear, the doors slammed shut. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pressed the button for the 13th floor. The doors opened to a dimly lit hallway. As I stepped out, the temperature dropped even further. I couldn't hear my own breathing, and then I saw it. The elevator's buttons started lighting up in a chaotic pattern. A scream no, a whisper, echoed down the hallway. It was my voice distorted and distant. 9. End with a twist or unsettling note. The elevator doors opened and the figure inside stepped out. It looked exactly like me. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered. "This floor, it's yours now." The doors shut behind me. The copy room demon. I've always hated working late, but tonight feels different. There's something about the copy room, something I can't quite explain. People say it's haunted, and I used to laugh it off. Until now, I never believed in things like this, but that was before I heard the whispers, before the darkness took form. I'm sitting in the break room, half listening to the usual chatter around me. The hum of the vending machine, the clinking of coffee cups, everything's just background noise. But then John's voice cuts through, shaky and hesitant, and I can't help but focus. He's talking about the copy room. It's a topic that's never bothered me before, never even crossed my mind. But now, hearing him, something feels off. I glance over at him, noticing the way his eyes dart nervously around the room, like he's expecting something to leap out of the shadows. It's not like him. He's usually the one cracking jokes, the one who lightens the mood. But today, he's different. He says he heard something moving in the copy room after hours. At first, I think it's just the usual banter, something to fill the silence. But then he keeps going. It wasn't just the soft whir of the machines. No, he swears he heard breathing. Slow, heavy breathing like something, or someone was waiting for him. I feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I can hear the sharp intake of breath in the air, like even the room itself is holding its breath. John's voice falters as he speaks, and it's clear he's not joking. I look around the table at the others, but they don't seem to feel what I do. Maria, sitting beside him, shushes him, brushing it off with a laugh. "You're just tired, John. It's stress. You've been working too hard." But the way John shifts uncomfortably, how his hands keep twitching at his side like he wants to run, makes me wonder. The room suddenly feels colder, the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead a little too sharp in my ears. My heart rate picks up as I try to shake off the sudden unease creeping into my thoughts. I try to laugh it off to convince myself it's nothing, but somewhere deep inside, I wonder, could he be telling the truth? I'm sitting at my desk, fingers idly tapping the keys as I scroll through emails, the soft hum of my computer filling the space around me. Then, without warning, the lights flicker. It's quick, just a flash of darkness that makes my stomach tighten. I glance up, expecting the usual flicker of the fluorescent lights, but something about it feels different tonight. The shadows stretch longer, more menacing. I don't have time to process it before my computer screen goes black. I frown, trying to force the power button, but it refuses to cooperate. It's frustrating, and I'm about to stand up and leave for the IT department when, out of nowhere, the screen flickers back to life without me doing anything. But that's when I hear it. A whisper. Soft, too soft to be from anyone nearby. It's unintelligible at first, like the sound of wind shifting through the cracks of an old house. But as it lingers, I swear it's more than that. It's clear, like a voice, a deliberate voice. My heart skips a beat and my breath hitches in my throat. I freeze, my hands hovering above the keyboard, my pulse suddenly pounding in my ears. I glance up instinctively, my eyes darting toward the glass door of the copy room. That's where it's coming from. I'm almost certain of it. There, just beyond the doorframe, I catch a flash of movement. Someone is shifting inside, just out of view. The door to the copy room is ajar, barely open, and the faint light from the hallway casts long, distorted shadows across the floor. My throat tightens and I swallow hard. A chill runs down my spine, my skin prickling as the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I don't know why, but I feel it. I feel watched. I force myself to look away, but my eyes keep drifting back to that cracked door. What's inside? Why does it feel like the room is calling to me? The next day, I can't shake this nagging feeling. The air feels different, charged in a way I can't explain. I'm walking down the hall when I notice it. The tension. It's in the way people avoid the copy room, how they quicken their pace when they pass by. The faces I pass are stiff, eyes darting nervously toward the door, but no one dares to look directly at it. I hear snippets of murmurs, whispers, as I walk by, and I catch a few coworkers muttering about the copy room demon. The words don't make sense to me at first. Who's talking about a demon? But the more I overhear, the more I realize. No one's willing to say it out loud. They talk in hushed tones, like the words themselves are dangerous, as if voicing them could invite something worse. It's been days since I first heard the whispers, but it feels like that moment is always with me, following me. I can't shake the sensation, the strange weight pressing on my chest. Everyone's on edge, like they're holding their breath. And I'm no different. I can't ignore it any longer. I feel watched, like something's waiting for me to slip up. There's a constant hum in the air around me, like the room itself is alive, watching, waiting. I try to push the thought away as I walk down the hall, but my feet slow when I reach the copy room. My heartbeat quickens, the pulse in my throat almost too loud. The door is slightly ajar again, the faint flicker of light spilling out, casting long shadows across the floor. My breath catches, and for a moment I stand there, caught in the stillness, staring at that cracked doorway. The air feels thick around it, heavier than anywhere else in the building. Something about the place, it feels wrong. I want to keep walking to ignore it, but I can't. I can't stop looking at it. I can't stop feeling like I'm about to make a mistake, like I'm already too close. It's late, much later than I intended to stay, but there's too much work piling up. The building is eerily silent, the only sound the soft, constant hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The air feels stale, like it's been trapped in here for hours, maybe days. I focus on the screen, trying to push the unease gnawing at the edges of my mind. But then I hear it. At first, it's faint, a low whir that cuts through the stillness. The sound of the copy machine. I try to convince myself it's just the machines acting up, maybe an automatic cycle or something. But when I listen harder, my skin prickles. The sound, it's not quite right. I haven't seen anyone in the copy room since I got here, so why is the machine running? I try to shake it off, but then again, that whisper, soft like a breath against my ear, but clearer this time, it's not the hum of machinery or the buzz of the lights. No, it's something else. It's distinct. It's my name, Alice. It calls me. My stomach drops. I feel my pulse quicken, my heart hammering in my chest. Every instinct screams at me to turn and leave, but my body, it won't obey. My feet move of their own accord, drawn toward the door of the copy room like I'm in a trance. My hand trembles as I reach out to grab the door handle, the cold metal sending a shock through my fingers. The lights flicker, just once, but it's enough to send a shiver crawling up my spine. And then, the door. It creaks open, on its own. I freeze, my breath catching in my throat. The room is empty, just like I thought it would be. But something's wrong. The air feels thick, heavy, like something is pressing down on me. It's suffocating, and I can't help but take a step back, my eyes scanning the room, trying to find a reason for the feeling of being watched. But there's nothing. Nothing but the oppressive silence and the buzzing of the lights above. And yet, I know I'm not alone. The air in the copy room is colder than I expected, a sharp chill that seems to cling to my skin as I step inside. I hesitate for a moment, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above my head, but the copier sits idle in the corner. Everything looks normal, or it should be. But something feels off, like the room is holding its breath, waiting. My heartbeat quickens as I walk toward the machine, and I reach out, my hand trembling as I place it on the cold surface. The moment my fingers make contact, a sharp electric tingle shoots up my arm, cold and biting, like the machine is alive, pulsing with something dark. I pull my hand back, but before I can even think, I hear it. The door. It slams shut behind me, loud and violent, making my heart leap in my chest. I whip around, eyes wide, but there's no one there. My breath hitches as I stare at the door, now locked, and then the whispers start. They're no longer soft or faint, they're louder now, everywhere around me. It's like they're coming from the walls, the ceiling, from inside my own head. I can't escape them. The voices, they call my name. They're too clear, too real. Suddenly, the machines begin to stir, their whirs and clicks filling the room. But it's not just the sound of paper feeding through. No, this time the machines are printing, not paper, though. They're printing something else, something terrifying. I step back, eyes wide as the first sheet of paper spits out, curling at the edges as it lands on the floor. I don't want to look, but I can't help it. I bend down slowly, my hand shaking as I pick up the paper. And there it is, in thick, black ink. I see you. My throat tightens as I look at the next sheet and the next, each one falling from the machine, each one bearing the same horrifying message. I see you, over and over again. Panic surges through me, a wave of cold dread spreading through my chest as I back away from the machine, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The whispers grow louder, surrounding me, and I know, that whatever is in this room with me, whatever is controlling the machine, is closer than ever, and it's watching me. The darkness in the copy room seems to stretch, like it's alive, curling into corners I didn't notice before. The air is thick, suffocating, pressing down on me as I turn, my heart hammering in my chest. I know something is there. I can feel it watching me. The shadows in the corner start to move, shifting unnaturally, and my breath catches in my throat. It's forming, taking shape, though I can't make out exactly what it is. I try to focus, but my eyes won't cooperate. All I see is a mass of dark, swirling smoke, a silhouette that's both there and not there at the same time. It's wrong. The whispers, they're no longer just in my head. They grow louder, a discordant cacophony, overlapping voices all speaking at once, their words sharp and jagged. It's as though the room itself is alive, screaming, its very walls vibrating with malevolence. My body freezes, panic seizing me in a tight grip, but I can't look away. The figure in the corner is growing, looming, and every instinct in me screams to run. But I can't. It's not just the room anymore. It's it. The thing that's been waiting for me, watching me. All this time, I've been walking in the dark, thinking it was just the building, just the copy room, haunted by the whispers of restless souls. But no, it's not the room. It's this thing. It's been feeding on the fear of anyone who dares to come near, its hunger growing, its power growing. I thought I could leave, thought I could dismiss it. But now I know it's not just a ghost or a haunting. It's a demon, alive in the machine, and it chooses its victims. The shape in the corner shifts again, and for a moment I think I see its face. But I can't look at it. Not directly. It's wrong, so wrong that my eyes can't process it. It twists and bends in ways that make my stomach churn. I try to back away to escape, but when I reach for the door, my hand meets nothing but cold metal. The handle won't budge. The door is locked. I turn frantically, my breath coming faster, but the room seems to close in around me, the shadows suffocating. It's here. It's real. And there's no way out. The room is closing in on me. It's not just the shadows anymore. It's the air, thick and suffocating, pulling at me, pressing down from all sides. The darkness swells, expanding like a living thing, and the whispers, they're no longer whispers. They've grown, risen into deafening screams all at once, swirling around me, each voice a warning, a curse, a promise of something far worse. My hands are shaking uncontrollably as I back into the corner, my heart pounding in my ears, my legs weak beneath me. I can't escape. It's like the room itself is alive now, suffocating me, pulling me toward it, toward the demon. Its presence is overwhelming, like a weight on my chest, my throat tight with terror. The whispers, no, the screams, are deafening. I can feel them clawing at my mind, each word a jagged, cutting sound that tears at my sanity. I try to fight it, try to scream back, to break free, but it's useless. I can feel it, creeping into my bones, wrapping around my mind like chains. And then I see it. The demon's eyes. Those eyes, they're everywhere. They're in the copier. They're in the paper that spills from it, those black ink eyes staring back at me from the pages. I try to look away, but they follow me. They're in the glass of the copier now, reflecting back at me, and I can feel my own reflection twisting, distorting. I reach for the machine, desperate to destroy it, to end this nightmare, but the moment my hand touches the glass, my face changes. I stare at it, horrified, as my reflection warps, contorts, and shifts. My eyes are no longer my own. There! It's the demon's face, my face, stares back at me, grinning, twisted, as if mocking me. I scream, but no sound escapes my lips. I'm trapped in the reflection, trapped in the room, trapped in its grasp. I try to pull my hand away, but it's too late. The demon has me, and I can feel it deep in my chest, deep in my soul. I am its prisoner now. The next morning comes too quickly, and I'm still here. I can't escape it. I stand at the edge of the hallway, watching, paralyzed by the sight of the copy room door. It's locked, just like it was when I tried to leave last night. But this time, there's no frantic pounding, no pleading. The door is just there, a barrier between me and the world that no longer feels real. Then I hear footsteps. A coworker enters, oblivious. They don't see me, don't know. I want to scream to stop them, but I can't. My throat feels like it's full of glass. They approach the copier, acting as though nothing has happened, nothing has changed. It hums quietly, almost peacefully, as if it hasn't just consumed everything. The screen flashes ready. It's all wrong. The normalcy of it, the casual hum of the machine, the soft clicking of the buttons, it's all wrong. I want to scream to warn them, but they can't hear me. I try, but my voice sounds different, distant, as if it's trapped behind glass. They'll never know, they'll never understand. I tried to warn them, but now I'm here, inside the machine, watching, waiting. The realization hits me like a wave, and I feel it deep in my bones. I am the machine now. My voice echoes, distorted and faint, a whisper that only I can hear. I'm trapped in this endless loop, and the machine, it has me. I watch as my coworker reaches for the paper tray, completely unaware, and the camera zooms in on the copier, the faintest whisper of my voice drifting out from within. It's soft, barely audible, but it's there. I see you. The invisible supervisor. I don't know when it started, but it's always been there, an unnerving feeling of being watched. At first, it was just a passing thought, something I could ignore, but then it became impossible to ignore. I sit at the small, round table in the break room, staring at my own reflection in the half-empty coffee cup. The liquid is cold, but I can't bring myself to drink it. My hands feel heavy, trembling slightly, and the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead makes my skin crawl. They keep saying I'm imagining things, I think to myself, glancing at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticks with a dull, deliberate sound, louder than it should be in the otherwise quiet room. "Overreacting," my manager had said, brushing me off with a forced smile. HR didn't even bother to meet my eyes. But deep in my gut, I know something's wrong. I glance toward the corner of the room, the dark corner where the overhead light doesn't quite reach. The shadows seem to ripple there, almost as if they are alive, shifting and curling like smoke. My chest tightens as a chill runs down my spine. No one else notices it. How can they not see it? How can they not feel it? A faint hum echoes in the back of my mind, like someone whispering just out of earshot. I can't make out the words, but the sound, it's unsettling, like nails scraping against the edge of a chalkboard. My fingers twitch again, hovering near the coffee cup, but I pull back. The ceramic feels unnaturally cold, almost freezing, and I can't shake the thought that if I touch it, I might not be able to let go. I force my gaze back to the clock. The hands seem to drag as though time itself has thickened, slowing to a crawl. A bead of sweat rolls down the back of my neck, and I wipe it away, but the sensation lingers, sticky and wrong. I take a shaky breath, the air thick and stale, carrying the faint metallic tang of something. Off. Copper. Blood. No, just my imagination, right? I tell myself to stand, to move, but my legs feel rooted to the floor. The shadows in the corner grow darker, denser, and for a moment, just a moment, I swear I see a pair of eyes glinting back at me. They're gone before I can blink. I'm not imagining it. I'm not. Am I? The overhead lights flicker again, casting stuttering shadows across my desk. The hum of the fluorescent tubes vibrates in my ears, sharp and relentless, like an invisible pressure pressing down on me. I rub my temples, but the noise doesn't fade. My fingers hover over the keyboard and I try to focus, but my thoughts keep scattering like loose papers in a breeze. The hallway outside is quiet, too quiet for this time of day. Then, faintly, I hear it again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing down the corridor. I freeze, my breath caught in my chest, my ears straining to follow the sound. But when I glance toward the hallway, no one is there. Mark's face flashes in my mind. He left yesterday, I remind myself, my throat tightening around the thought. He didn't say goodbye, didn't even clear out his desk. just stood up and walked out like something had snapped inside him. He used to be the one cracking jokes, breaking the tension when the air in here got heavy. But in the end, even he couldn't handle it, whatever it is. I look up as if expecting to see him. Of course I don't, it's just me now. Me and the others. I glance toward the far side of the room where a few of my colleagues sit hunched over their desks. They've stopped talking to me or to each other. They just sit there, typing, their eyes dull, their faces pale, like they're running on autopilot. They're changing, I think, my stomach twisting. I can't explain it, but I know I'm not imagining it. There's something wrong with them, something wrong with this whole place. But no one will admit it. They pretend nothing's happening, as if silence can make it go away. The sound of a chair scraping across the floor jolts me. I snap my head toward the noise, my pulse spiking. It's Mark, or at least I think it is for a split second. A familiar silhouette walking past my desk. But no, it can't be. Mark left. I swallow hard, the air tasting bitter. "Mark!" I call out, my voice a strained whisper. He doesn't stop, doesn't even turn his head. I watch him disappear around the corner and a sick, cold knot forms in my stomach. The hairs on my arms stand on end. I try to shake it off, returning my gaze to the computer screen, but my fingers falter on the keys. Out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moves across my desk. My breath catches, and my heart thuds painfully in my chest. Slowly, I lift my head, my gaze sweeping the room. Nothing. The desk lamp flickers. The fluorescent lights buzz louder, like they're vibrating inside my skull. My chest feels tight, and I struggle to take a deep breath. It's nothing, I tell myself, gripping the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turn white. It's just the lights. Just my imagination. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone. I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. At first, I thought talking to someone would help. Maybe if I said it out loud, someone else would admit they felt it too. That constant pressure, like eyes boring into your back. I needed to know I wasn't losing it, so I asked. I started with Linda at the front desk. She's always been friendly, quick with a smile. But when I brought it up about the shadows, the feeling of being watched, her face went blank. The kind of blank where you know someone's hiding something. She just shrugged, her smile forced, and said, "I'm sure it's nothing." Her voice cracked on nothing. I moved on to Tony in IT. He barely looked at me, just kept clicking his mouse, his eyes glued to his screen. "Haven't noticed anything weird," he muttered, but his foot was tapping against the floor fast, like he was waiting for me to leave. And then there was Amanda in HR. She listened, nodded, even tilted her head like she cared. But when I mentioned the complaints, the ones I know people have been making, her demeanor shifted. Her expression froze, her hands folded neatly on her desk like she was bracing for impact. "We've looked into it," she said, her voice clipped. "There's nothing to worry about." But her eyes told a different story. Everywhere I turn, it's the same. The same rehearsed lines, the same polite dismissals. But it's not just their words. It's the way they won't meet my eyes. The way their hands twitch, their shoulders tense, the way they look past me like something's standing right behind me. I hear it in the whispers, too, the ones that stop as soon as I walk into the room. Words half-spoken, quickly silenced like they're afraid to say too much. They know, they might not admit it, but they know. And now, I know too, there's something else here. It's in the way the air feels heavy, thick with something unseen. The way the lights flicker and hum like they're straining against whatever this thing is. The way shadows stretch just a little too far, a little too long, like they have a life of their own. My chest tightens as I step into the break room. The buzzing of the fridge is louder than usual, grating and metallic, and the faint scent of burnt coffee lingers in the air. I glance at the corner of the room where the shadows always gather, swallowing the light. It's darker there than it should be. I thought I was imagining it. I wanted to believe I was, but I'm not. Something's watching us. It's been here all along, and it's only a matter of time before it steps out of the shadows. The office feels different at night. It always does. The air is colder, sharper, almost like it's pressing against my skin. The hum of the air conditioning fills the silence, low and constant, but it's louder now, throbbing in my ears like a warning I can't ignore. I sit at my desk, staring at the files on my computer screen. The text blurs, my eyes struggling to focus. The words refuse to make sense, fragments slipping through my mind like water through my fingers. I press my palms against my temples. Focus, Sarah, just focus. But then I hear it. It's faint, barely more than a breath. A whisper. I whip my head to the side, my heart lurching. The office is empty, or at least it should be. The rows of desks stretch out in every direction, each one shrouded in shadows, lit only by the dull glow of my computer screen. Hello. My voice comes out too soft, cracking in the stillness. Silence. Did I hear that? I don't know anymore. My thoughts feel scattered, torn apart by exhaustion and something else, something heavier, something I can't name. I've been here alone before, but this isn't the same. There's a weight in the air, something oppressive and wrong. It feels like the building is alive, like it's breathing with me, watching me. I push my chair back, the screech of the wheels cutting through the quiet like a knife. My legs feel stiff as I stand, and my breath catches in my throat. My eyes dart toward the rows of desks, the places where the darkness seems to pool. Slowly, I take a step forward. My heels click softly against the tile, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. I walk past each desk, glancing behind the partitions. Empty, all of them, just blank computer screens and abandoned chairs. But the feeling doesn't go away. It's still there. I stop in front of the window at the far end of the room. The city lights outside blink in the distance, muted and distant, separated from me by the glass. I stare at my reflection, pale and tired, my hair sticking to my forehead. But then I see it. The air leaves my lungs in a rush as my knees threaten to give out. There's something in the reflection, behind me. It's not a shadow, it's more than that. Its shape is wrong, warped, like it's leaning in toward me but refusing to come fully into focus. Its eyes. No, I can't see them, but I feel them, staring. I whirl around, my heart pounding in my chest, my vision swimming. Nothing. The office is empty. But I know it's not just in my head. I know something's following me, watching me, and it's getting closer. I step into the office, and the silence hits me like a wave. It's unnatural, heavy, pressing against my chest. There's no chatter, no phones ringing, no sound of fingers tapping on keyboards. Just silence. The hallway stretches out before me, lined with desks. They're still here, personal belongings scattered across them. Coffee mugs half full. Jackets draped over chair backs. A family photo propped up on one desk, the smiling faces frozen in time. But the people, gone. I walk slowly, my footsteps echoing on the tiled floor. The sound feels too loud, like it doesn't belong here. Each step sends a chill through me, a reminder that I'm alone, completely alone. I glance at the empty chairs, their wheels slightly turned, as if someone just got up and walked away. Papers flutter faintly from the air conditioning, the only movement in the room. They've all left, I think, the realization sinking deeper with every step. Not just a few of them, all of them. At first, I thought it was panic, that they'd all let fear get the best of them. But now I understand. It wasn't just fear. It was survival. They left because they knew. I stop in front of Linda's desk. Her chair is pulled out, a sweater folded neatly on the armrest. Her water bottle sits uncapped, a bead of condensation sliding down its side. She didn't even finish her drink before she ran. I reach out, brushing my fingers against the edge of her desk. The surface is cold, almost unnaturally so. A shiver runs through me and I pull my hand back. I thought I could handle this, that staying would prove I was stronger than the dread gnawing at the edges of my mind. But now I know what they knew. There is something here. It's in the air, thick and suffocating. It clings to me, wrapping around my shoulders like a weight I can't shake off. I feel it behind me, beside me, everywhere I go, always watching. I turn my head quickly, scanning the rows of desks. My breath catches, my eyes straining to find. What? A shadow? A flicker of movement? Nothing, but I feel it watching. It always watches. My legs tremble as I take another step, the stillness swallowing me whole. The lights buzz faintly overhead, dimmer than they should be, casting long, warped shadows that seem to stretch toward me. They left because they knew what I know now. This isn't fear. It's certainty, and it's too late to leave. The office is a shell now. Just shadows and silence stretching endlessly around me. The lights flicker overhead, their weak glow barely holding back the darkness. Each flash feels like a heartbeat, uneven and strained, as if the building itself is alive and struggling. I stand in the center of the room, frozen. My breath comes in short, shallow gasps, the sound louder than it should be in the stillness. The air is thick, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to think, hard to move. I hear it. A shift, a whisper, a sound that's not a sound, it's behind me. Or in front of me, or maybe everywhere at once. My skin prickles as the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I can't run anymore. My legs won't move, rooted to the floor as if the shadows themselves are holding me in place. There's nowhere left to go. It's here. It's always been here. The flickering light casts strange shapes across the room, stretching and twisting like they're alive. One shadow catches my eye, different from the rest. It grows larger, darker, as if it's moving toward me, pulling itself out of the walls, the floor, the very air around me. I want to scream, but the sound catches in my throat, choked off by the crushing weight of its presence. My mind races, grasping for answers, for logic, for anything to make sense of what's happening. But nothing fits. Nothing except. What if it's not what we think? My voice shakes as I whisper the thought aloud, barely recognizing my own words. What if it's not in it at all? The realization hits me like a punch to the gut. My thoughts spiral, fragments of memory colliding in my head. The supervisor, the one no one ever saw. No meetings, no introductions, just orders that came from nowhere. I never saw their face. Maybe I never was supposed to. The shadow looms closer, swallowing the light as it moves. The hum of the air conditioning grows louder, distorted, like a deep, guttural growl reverberating through the room. My heart pounds in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drum. The pressure intensifies, wrapping around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I feel it now, not just its presence, but its intent. It's watching me, peeling me apart layer by layer, seeing everything I am, everything I've been. I open my mouth to scream, but the lights go out. Darkness swallows me whole. The silence is deafening. The office is quiet now. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses into your ears, making your heartbeat sound impossibly loud. I don't even remember when I stood up, or if I ever did. My chair sits there, just slightly turned toward the desk, the way I always leave it. Like I could just sit back down, pick up where I left off, and everything would feel normal again. But it won't. The air feels dense, like the room is holding its breath. My breath comes in uneven bursts, each exhale shaking as if the act of breathing is too much effort. The desk looks familiar. Too familiar. That's when it hits me. How long have I been here? I don't remember coming in this morning, or yesterday, or what day is it? The thought splinters in my head, jagged and raw, refusing to come together. Maybe it was me all along. I blink, my vision swimming, but the chair stays exactly as it is, empty, waiting, as if expecting me to return. My chest tightens and I take a step back, my heel catching on the edge of the carpet. What if I never left? What if I was the one watching? A chill crawls up my spine, slow and deliberate, and I wrap my arms around myself as if that could stop the cold from seeping in. My reflection glints faintly in the darkened window, but something's wrong. It doesn't quite match. The edges of my silhouette ripple, like a mirage twisting in the heat. No, it's not heat. It's something else. I stagger back another step, my pulse hammering in my throat. My voice comes out a whisper, fragmented, barely audible. Maybe I was the supervisor, maybe I never left. The words feel foreign, not my own, as though someone else is speaking through me. Or maybe they've always been mine. My head feels heavy, weighed down by something I can't name. The walls seem to shift, closing in, the shadows stretching farther than they should. Maybe it was never meant for me to leave. The thought sticks, sinking deep into my chest like a shard of ice. My reflection wavers one last time before disappearing entirely, leaving only the faint outline of the chair in the corner of my eye. Empty, waiting. And then the silence swallows everything. The whispering HVAC system. I've always hated the late shifts. There's something about the silence in this building after hours that feels wrong. I used to think it was just the isolation, the loneliness of being the last one here. But then it started. The whispers. I can hear it again. The whispering. It's been happening more frequently lately, low, faint murmurs that seem to come from nowhere, yet everywhere. I can't escape it, no matter how hard I try. It's there, lurking in the background, filling the air with a quiet urgency. At first, I thought it was just the hum of the air conditioning, maybe some noise drifting through the vents. But no, these whispers don't sound like static. There's a rhythm to them, a pattern, a deliberate intent. I glance around the office, trying to ignore it, but it's hard. Claire walks past my desk, her eyes locked on her phone, completely distracted. She doesn't even look up at me, but I can see it. The tension in her shoulders, the way her steps quicken as she passes. I know she hears it too, the whispering. It's not just me. I tap my fingers on the surface of my desk, my nerves fraying as I watch her. I wish I could stop the thoughts in my head, stop the unease that tightens in my chest. But I can't. The whispers keep creeping in like a cold wind brushing against my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. I hear them again. This time they're clearer, just on the edge of comprehension. But still, I can't make out the words. It's almost like they're speaking in a language I should know, but don't. And sometimes it feels like they're not just whispers. It feels like they're predicting things. Things I don't want to happen. I glance back at Claire. She still hasn't looked at me. Her eyes are distant, lost in whatever she's reading on her phone, but I can see it in her face, her lips pressed tight, her jaw clenched like she's holding something back. Maybe she's heard it too. Or maybe she's just scared to admit it. I want to ask her, to scream and say, "Do you hear it? Can you hear them too?" But I can't. I'm too afraid of what might happen if I do. The whispers are louder now, louder than ever. And I can't escape them. I can't ignore them anymore. They're pulling me in, and I'm not sure I want to fight it. I'm not sure I can. I lean back in my chair, my fingers still tapping, but now I'm not so sure it's just nerves anymore. It feels like something else. Something waiting, and I think deep down I already know that Claire is hearing it too. We're not alone. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. I walked down the hallway, the lights flickering above me, casting strange shadows on the walls. The air felt thick, heavier than usual, like something was about to snap. My heart raced as I moved past the printer, that familiar machine I always ignored. But today it was different, and then I saw her. Claire, she was standing there right in front of the printer, not moving. At first, I didn't think much of it, just another typical moment in this empty, lifeless office. But then I heard it. The whisper. It was clearer this time, not just a murmur I could almost hear. This time it was distinct, like it was right next to my ear. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It said, "Watch her." I couldn't even process it. I didn't understand what it meant or why it was so urgent. But before I could react, the printer erupted in a violent blast. A sound so sharp, so sudden, it felt like the whole building shook. I jumped back instinctively, my heart hammering in my chest, but it was nothing compared to the force of what happened next. Claire was thrown back by the explosion. I heard the sickening thud of her body hitting the floor, and for a moment, time stood still. The noise, the chaos, it all blurred into the background. I don't remember moving. My legs were running before I even realized it. I was at her side in seconds, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. Her eyes were wide, glassy, like she was still trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her breath was shallow, her body trembling, but she couldn't find the words. I didn't know what to say either. What could I say? I didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't want to think about the whisper or the warning. The whole situation was impossible. A nightmare unfolding in front of me, and yet there it was, Claire, alive but barely, and the aftermath of whatever had just exploded in that printer. My heart was still racing. Every part of me wanted to run, to escape this place and whatever was watching us, whatever was whispering in the corners of my mind. But I couldn't leave her. I couldn't leave anyone here. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just a coincidence. I knew that now. I knew what I heard. I could still hear it in my mind, the faint, deliberate whisper echoing in my ears, but no one else seemed to hear it. Not really. I sat there, trying to hold it together, trying to act normal as I approached my coworkers one by one. Their faces, tired and unbothered, stared back at me. Claire, after the explosion, she was quiet now, distant, like she didn't remember anything at all. But the others, they were brushing it off. I asked them, gently at first, trying not to sound crazy. "Did you hear anything strange? Whispers, maybe?" They laughed it off, as if I had made some stupid joke. "Nah, probably just the air conditioning, Noah. You're working too hard." But I could feel it, a pit growing in my stomach. It wasn't just noise. I knew it wasn't. I started questioning more of them, desperately trying to find someone who would admit they'd heard the same thing. felt the same unease creeping up their spine. But it was the same every time. A quick chuckle, a dismissive wave, a muttered, "You're hearing things." But they were wrong. I wasn't imagining it. There was something in the air, something more than the stale office ventilation or the creaks of old ducts. That's when I started looking closer. The vents, the air system. I traced the path through the building, following the cooling ducts, trying to find something that would explain the whispers. But it only led me deeper into the building's heart, where the shadows seemed thicker, more oppressive. The ducts were old, older than me, older than anyone in this office. They creaked and groaned like they had a life of their own, like they were telling secrets, whispering things I wasn't meant to hear. And the whispers, they weren't just noise. They weren't just the building shifting or the air moving. They were warnings. I don't know how I knew that. Maybe it was the way they felt, the way they made my skin crawl, how my pulse quickened every time I heard them. I wasn't sure if I could trust my own mind anymore, but deep down, I knew I wasn't crazy. I had to find out what was causing it, what was watching us, what was making the whispers, and why. But I couldn't shake the feeling that, the deeper I went, the more I might not come back. It's happening again. The wind outside screams through the trees, rattling the windows with a sound so sharp it makes my teeth clench. The office feels colder tonight, colder than it ever has before. The hum of the lights flickers, casting an eerie glow on the empty desks around me. I'm alone again, staying late for the third time this week. But this time it's different. The whispers, they're louder, more distinct. They curl around me, slithering through the silence. I can't tell where they're coming from, behind me, above me, beneath the floor. They're everywhere, surrounding me. "The next one is you." The words slice through my thoughts and I freeze. They're not just random sounds, they're deliberate. It's as if something knows something is waiting. The chill that creeps down my spine isn't from the storm outside. No, this is something else. And it's not wrong. The accidents, they're happening faster now. I can feel it in the air, like a storm brewing beneath my skin. I try to push the thought away, but I can't. I can't stop thinking about Greg. It happened earlier today. He slipped on the stairs, the crash echoing through the building like thunder. But here's the thing, I heard the whispers before it happened. I tried to warn him. I remember rushing to the stairs, but he brushed me off. He didn't believe me. No one ever does. He didn't know what I knew, that the whispers were more than just noise, that they could predict what was coming, but only if you listened. I didn't listen. I should have. And now the whispers are back, louder, closer. I can feel them crawling up my legs, wrapping around my throat. I can hear them behind me, and when I turn, there's nothing there, just the empty, hollow space of the office stretching on. I can't breathe. I stumble toward the air vents, my hand shaking as I reach out to touch them, as if somehow that might explain all of this. The metal is cold, unnaturally cold. And then it happens. A rush of icy air. It slams into me like a physical force, sending a shock through my body. It's not just the storm outside. It feels like the building itself is alive, like it's breathing, pulling in the wind, exhaling fear. The walls groan, the lights flicker again, and I can almost hear the building whispering to me. It knows I'm here. It's waiting. I can't leave, not now. I don't know how much longer I have before I become the next one. I did something stupid. I shouldn't have gone down there, but I couldn't stop myself. The whispers were getting worse, louder, more insistent, as if they were calling me. They'd been following me, circling my thoughts, twisting my mind until I could hardly breathe without hearing them. So I did the only thing I could think of. I followed them. I traced the sound to the air ducts. The walls around me felt colder, the hum of the air conditioning an unwelcoming presence. Each step down the hall felt like it was pulling me deeper into something I couldn't escape. The hallways felt infinite, the doors all closed, no one else in sight. The whispers were louder now, deafening. They were all around me, vibrating in my skull, twisting my stomach. I had to keep going. I found the door to the basement, rusted and forgotten. It creaked when I opened it, a low groan that made my heart race. I stepped into the dark. The air down here was thick, musty with years of neglect. But I could feel it. Feel the life in the building, in the air, in the vents. And then I saw it. The HVAC system. It was huge, sprawling across the basement like some kind of mechanical monster, its pipes and vents twisting around each other like veins in a body. But it wasn't just metal and wires. It was alive. I can't explain it, but it was. It was pulsing, breathing. The sounds it made weren't the soft whirring of a normal air system. They were deeper, more primal, like the sound of something ancient, something hungry. I backed away, panic rising in my chest, but the whispers, God, the whispers, they were louder now, clearer than they'd ever been before. And that's when I understood. The system wasn't just feeding on the energy of the building. It was feeding on us, every accident, every death. They weren't random. They were planned, chosen, and I was the next one, the whispers. They knew exactly what was coming. I felt the weight of it, the suffocating certainty pressing down on me. Every moment that passed seemed to bring me closer to something I couldn't escape, something that was already waiting for me. And in the dark, I realized something that froze me in place. I'd always been a part of this. The building, the system, the whispers, they'd been leading me here the whole time. I didn't know how to fight this. I didn't know if I even could, but I wasn't going to make it out alive. It's too late now. The moment I stepped into the basement, I knew it was over. The air here is thick with something I can't even begin to describe, like the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing down on me. The whispers, they're louder, closer now. It's like they're inside my skull, swirling around my thoughts, pressing against my ears. They're not just voices anymore. They feel like they're part of me. I step further into the room and everything seems wrong. The flickering lights overhead cast long shadows, making the walls seem to stretch and twist. The HVAC system is here, yes, but it's not what I thought. It's alive, moving. The metal pipes hum with an unnatural energy, and as I watch, the shadows around them seem to pulse like they're breathing. I swear I can hear the system shift. It's like it's waking up. And then, the whispers, they change. They're not just whispers anymore. They're a scream, a low and guttural sound that crawls beneath my skin. It's as if the building itself knows I'm here, knows I've come too far. The walls around me seem to close in, the vents narrowing, and I can't breathe. My chest feels tight, like something's pressing down on it. I turn, I can't even see clearly anymore. My vision is blurring, but I feel the pressure, the weight of the space around me. The building is shifting, alive with something ancient, something hunting me. I should have left when I had the chance. The moment I started hearing those whispers, I should have run. But I didn't. I kept pushing. I kept listening. And now it's too late. The vents, they're closing in, suffocating me. I hear them, feel them moving, twisting, like they're reaching for me. Like they want to swallow me whole. I'm trapped. The coldness wraps around me, a suffocating embrace. I can barely move, my body feels frozen in place. My lungs burn for air, but there's nothing left. I should have left. But now they've been waiting for me. A sudden rush of air fills the space and everything goes silent. A silence so heavy it feels like it's crushing me, and I know. I know it's over, I told you. I was the last. But now it's too quiet. The hum of the HVAC system is the only sound in this place. It's strange, no one else is here. The desks are empty, the chairs pushed aside like everyone just disappeared. The whispers have stopped, gone, like they never existed. But I know it's not over, it never ends, the system. It never forgets. It chooses, and it waits, always. I can still feel it, even now. The cold grip of something unseen. It's still here, watching, waiting. I can hear it, even if I can't see it. The HVAC hums, but it's more than just air circulating. It's alive. It's listening. And it's remembering everything that's happened, every name it's taken. Maybe it's done with me. Maybe, but I know it won't stop, not for long. It'll find someone else, someone new, and then the whispers will start again. The accidents will happen, it will repeat, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it, because it's always watching. Always. And as I say this, I can almost hear it. Just beneath the hum, I can feel the weight of those whispers returning. I can't escape them. No one can. The system is still here. It never forgets. The invisible deadline. Everything was going as usual. Another tedious afternoon in the office, another few hours of data entry, until it happened. A project I didn't know existed appeared out of nowhere. It was on my calendar and no one else seemed to know about it. Invisible deadline, it read. No description, no details, just a time and date that didn't seem to fit with anything. I stared at it for too long, hoping it would disappear. But it didn't. Instead, something else did, something important. I sink into my worn-out couch, the cushions barely cushioning anything after all these years. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner of the apartment feels louder than usual, a steady drone that matches the static in my head. My laptop sits on the coffee table, open to a spreadsheet I've been glaring at for the past 2 hours. Its glow is harsh, almost accusatory in the dim light of the room. The clock ticks above the doorway, sharp and deliberate, counting down seconds I don't have. The deadlines, there are so many of them, like an ever-growing mountain I'm expected to climb without stopping. My friends keep saying I work too hard, but they don't understand. Falling behind isn't an option, not for me. I rub my temples, the ache spreading from my forehead down into my neck. Exhaustion wraps around me like a damp, heavy blanket. Sleep feels like a distant memory, something I can't quite grasp anymore. But even through the haze, there's something else gnawing at the edge of my mind, a whisper I can't shut out. The first time I heard about it, I laughed. The invisible deadline. It sounded ridiculous, like something you'd see scrawled in red on a late-night horror forum. But then the whisper started. It's faint at first, a subtle voice brushing against the back of my mind, barely noticeable over the noise of my own thoughts. But it grows stronger, persistent, urgent. You have to meet it, it says. You have to, or else. Or else what? I don't know, and that's the part that makes my stomach knot. The unknown. My fingers grip the edge of the couch, the fabric rough and familiar against my skin, grounding me in the moment. I close my eyes, but the darkness isn't comforting. Behind my eyelids, I see flashes, papers flying off desks, clock hands spinning wildly, shadows stretching across walls where there shouldn't be any. The air in the room feels heavier now, pressing against my chest. The hum of the refrigerator grows faint, replaced by a low, almost imperceptible sound. It's like a heartbeat, deep and rhythmic, but it's not mine. I open my eyes, and for a moment, I swear the room feels wrong. The corners seem darker, the shadows sharper. Even the ticking of the clock seems slower, each second dragging on longer than the last. I stand up, my legs shaky beneath me, and walk to the window. The city outside is alive, headlights streaking down streets and neon signs flickering in the distance. But even out there, something feels off. The lights seem dimmer, the motion more sluggish, as if the world is being wound down. I press my forehead against the cool glass, my breath fogging up a small patch of the pain. The whisper is back, stronger now. "You don't have much time," it says, clearer than ever. A chill runs down my spine, and I step back, wrapping my arms around myself. My heart is racing, the thud of it almost painful in my chest. I glance at the clock. It's still ticking, but the hands seem wrong, skewed. The numbers aren't where they're supposed to be. The whisper grows louder, more insistent. The words aren't just in my head anymore, they're everywhere. They're in the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the distant sounds of the city. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what the deadline is or what happens if I miss it. But I can feel it closing in, like the air itself is tightening around me. I didn't need this. Not now. Not ever. When I walked into the office that morning, the first thing I noticed was the air. It was thick, almost stifling, like stepping into a room that had been sealed shut for too long. The hum of the air conditioning was louder than usual, an endless drone that seemed to wrap around me, vibrating in my chest. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead, casting a sterile, almost clinical glow over everything. But the light didn't feel comforting. It was cold, unforgiving. The usual buzz of morning chatter was gone, replaced by the rapid click of keyboards and the occasional rustle of papers. Something was off. I glanced around, trying to catch someone's eye, but no one looked up. My coworkers, people who usually greeted me with tired but polite smiles, were hunched over their desks, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on their screens. Their movements were jerky, almost frantic, like they were racing against something unseen. I set my bag down, the soft thud startling in the oppressive quiet, and slid into my chair. Even my desk felt different. The surface seemed cooler to the touch, the faint scent of disinfectant lingering, sharp and chemical. I tried to focus, to push away the unease clawing at the edges of my mind, but it was impossible to ignore. The atmosphere in the room was electric, charged with something I couldn't name. It wasn't just the silence. It was the way people moved, quick, deliberate, like they were being watched. The occasional glance over a shoulder, the hurried whispers that stopped the second I walked past. My stomach knotted. I leaned back in my chair, the creak of the old metal frame cutting through the quiet like a scream. My eyes scanned the room again, searching for answers in the details. The uncharacteristic mess of papers on Lisa's desk, the way Mark's fingers trembled as he typed, the darting eyes of the intern by the copier. What did they know that I didn't? The whisper was back. Faint but insistent, weaving through the sounds of the office. It wasn't a voice exactly, it was more like a presence, a weight pressing down on my chest. The invisible deadline. The words echoed in my head, heavy and foreboding. No one had explained it to me, no one even mentioned it. And yet it was everywhere. I could feel it in the air, in the hurried footsteps, in the way people avoided each other's gaze. It was like a shadow that hung over the room, unseen but unmistakable. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, but I couldn't bring myself to type. My hands were cold, my palms clammy. It was as though the weight of this invisible thing wasn't just pressing on my chest. It was seeping into my bones, rooting me to the spot. What was it? Why wouldn't anyone talk about it? I swallowed hard, the taste of stale coffee still lingering in my mouth from earlier. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the faint hum of the air conditioning. I needed to figure it out. Whatever this was, whatever it meant, I could feel it closing in, wrapping tighter around me with every passing second. And the worst part? No one would tell me a thing. I sat down at my desk, the chair creaking under my weight as I settled in. The soft hum of the office buzzed faintly in the background, punctuated by the occasional cough or the distant ring of a phone. My computer's screen glared back at me, a blank slate waiting for me to dive into the endless sea of work. I exhaled sharply, cracked my knuckles, and started typing. But then something strange happened. A file popped open on its own. At first, I thought I'd accidentally clicked something. But no, my hands hadn't even touched the mouse. I leaned in closer, my brow furrowing as I scanned the screen. The file name was gibberish, symbols and numbers that didn't make any sense. And the contents, worse. The document was filled with garbled text, lines of code, and something else. Images, maybe. They were distorted, barely visible, like trying to make sense of a dream after you've woken up. What the? My voice was barely a whisper. I tried closing the file, but my cursor froze. The mouse wouldn't move. I clicked frantically, my heart picking up speed as the screen flickered. The file disappeared, replaced by a series of flashing images. Incomplete work. Spreadsheets with empty cells. Drafts of emails I'd never written. Notes I didn't remember typing. My stomach twisted. Each image felt like a glimpse into some alternate version of my reality, a timeline where I was drowning in unfinished tasks. And then the clock appeared. It was small, tucked away in the bottom corner of my screen, but it was impossible to ignore. Its digits glowed an ominous red, counting down from, 10 minutes, 15, I couldn't tell. My chest tightened, my breathing shallow as I stared at it. What the hell is this? I muttered, my voice cracking. The countdown mocked me, each tick like a hammer against my ribs. I tried everything, Control plus Alt plus Del, unplugging the computer, but nothing worked. The screen held me captive and the clock refused to budge. Tick, tick, tick. With every second that passed, the pressure in my chest grew heavier. My heart raced, hammering against my ribcage like it wanted to escape. I couldn't look away. The office sounds faded, replaced by the deafening roar of blood rushing in my ears. The clock seemed to drag me forward, pulling me toward. What? I didn't know. And then the countdown hit 0. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. I gasped, spinning around in my chair, expecting, what? Something. Someone. But the office looked the same, except for the faint buzz in the air, like a power line humming after a storm. That's when I saw Jake. He was walking past my desk, his shoulders hunched, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Jake, I called out, my voice shaking. He paused, glancing at me with wide, bloodshot eyes. His lips moved, but I could barely catch the words. The project, he mumbled, almost inaudible. It's almost too late. Jake, what do you mean? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, but he didn't answer. He kept walking, disappearing into the back office before I could stop him. The flickering lights steadied and the office seemed to return to normal. But I wasn't convinced. The clock might have disappeared, but its weight hadn't. It was still there, hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Whatever this was, whatever this invisible deadline wanted, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. I can't remember when the fear started. Was it when Jake gave me that strange, haunted look? Or maybe it was when I saw those shapes, dark, flickering shadows in the hallway, just on the edge of my vision. No, it must have been earlier than that. It's hard to say anymore. Time feels slippery, distorted, like I'm sinking deeper into something I can't name. I rub my temples, my fingers pressing hard against the tension throbbing in my skull. The fluorescent lights overhead buzz faintly, their sterile glow spilling over the cold, lifeless office. But the air feels wrong, thick and heavy, like it's pressing down on me. I glance at the clock on the wall. 10:15. Or was it 10:20 just a second ago? That clock, it's everywhere. Even when I'm not at my desk, I see it in my mind, the red numbers counting down to what? I don't know. The whispering tells me I should, though. The whispers. They're growing louder now. At first, they were faint, like wind brushing past my ear. But now they're insistent, wrapping around my thoughts like vines, twisting tighter with each passing second. They don't make sense, words I can't quite catch, fragments of warnings, maybe even commands. I stand up abruptly, my chair scraping the floor, the sound cutting through the eerie quiet like a scream. My heart pounds against my ribs faster than it should. My throat is dry. I just need a moment, I murmur to myself, but even my voice sounds unsteady. The hallway feels longer than usual as I make my way to the bathroom. My footsteps echo against the tiles, sharp and hollow. The shadows in the corners seem deeper, darker, as if they are hiding something. I keep my eyes forward, refusing to look. Don't look, the whispers seem to say. I push the bathroom door open, the creak of its hinges sending a shiver down my spine. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lights reflect off the white tiles. Too bright, too cold. I grip the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white as I lean forward, staring down at the drain. The water splashes against my palms, ice cold and shocking as I rinse my face. For a moment, the sound of the running faucet drowns out the whispers and I breathe a little easier. But when I look up, I freeze. My reflection stares back at me, but it's not right. Her eyes, my eyes, are wide, unblinking, filled with raw, unfiltered terror. Her face looks like mine, but there's something off about it. The way her lips tremble as if she's trying to warn me. I back away, my breath hitching in my throat. The reflection doesn't move. My chest tightens and my pulse roars in my ears. I squeeze my eyes shut, shaking my head violently. No, no, no. This isn't real. This isn't real. When I open my eyes again, the reflection is normal, but the whispers are louder now. You're running out of time, they hiss. I stagger out of the bathroom, my knees weak, my breath coming in shallow, rapid bursts. The world feels like it's tilting, spinning. Every corner of the office feels alive, like it's watching me, waiting for me to fail. I'm scared. I'm so scared, but I can't stop. I can't stop moving forward, even if I don't know what's waiting at the end of this countdown. I sat at my desk again, staring at the screen, but the numbers on the countdown consumed me. Minutes now, just minutes left. My chest felt tight, each breath a struggle. I couldn't think straight, couldn't focus. The clock wasn't just counting down anymore. It was taunting me, the red digits pulsating like a heartbeat, faster, louder, unrelenting. The air around me felt thicker, heavier, as if the entire room was closing in. The whispers were back too, faint but unmistakable, hissing at the edges of my consciousness. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. There had to be something, anything, that could explain what was happening. I clicked through old project files, scanning spreadsheets and emails, but it was all a blur of meaningless text. "Come on," I whispered, my voice trembling. "There has to be something here." And then I found it. A file buried deep in the archives, one I was certain wasn't there before. The name was simple: missing. My hand hesitated on the mouse, my pulse thundering in my ears. But I had no choice. I clicked it. The document opened and my stomach dropped. Names, dozens of them. Employees I recognized. People I'd worked with, joked with, shared coffee breaks with. But the further I scrolled, the more unsettling it became. Next to each name was a single word: terminated. No explanations, no details. Just the cold, clinical finality of that word. I felt the blood drain from my face as I reached the bottom of the list. The last few names I didn't recognize, and then I realized why. Those were the ones no one spoke of. The co-workers who had simply vanished, their desks cleared out overnight, their profiles erased from the system. The whispers grew louder, swirling in my mind like a storm. I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me, my hands trembling. My vision blurred as tears welled up, hot and stinging. I tried to swallow the lump forming in my throat, but it wouldn't budge. This wasn't just a deadline. It was a trap. A part of me knew it all along, didn't I? The way everyone avoided talking about it, the way Jake had looked at me this morning, the flickering shadows in the hallway. This wasn't a normal project. It wasn't even about work. It was something darker. Something I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. I glanced at the countdown again. 2 minutes left. My heart raced, panic clawing its way through me. What happened when the clock hit 0? Would I vanish too? Would my name be added to that list, erased like I was never here? I grabbed the mouse again, clicking frantically through more files, searching for a way out. But the whispers had become deafening now, a cacophony of voices I couldn't shut out. "Too late," they hissed. "It's too late." I slammed my fists on the desk, the sound echoing through the office like a gunshot. But no one even flinched. My co-workers were still hunched over their desks, typing, working like puppets on strings. I was alone in this. The red digits ticked down to 1 minute, and all I could do was stare, frozen, as the clock dragged me closer to whatever was coming next. The numbers on the clock blinked furiously, searing into my mind. 10 seconds, 9, 8. My chest heaved as I gasped for air, my hands clammy and trembling. I had to get out. I pushed back from my desk, the chair screeching against the floor. My legs felt weak, barely able to hold me, but I forced myself to move. The hallway stretched before me, eerily quiet, the usual hum of the office replaced by something else. A buzzing, low, persistent, and growing louder. I reached the door, my fingers fumbling for the handle. It wouldn't budge. I yanked harder, desperation clawing at my throat. "Come on." I screamed, my voice cracking, echoing in the empty space. Behind me, the lights flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. The air was electric, heavy with something unseen but undeniably there. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. Then I felt it. A presence. I turned slowly, every muscle in my body screaming at me not to. And that's when I saw it. Near my desk, standing in the dim, stuttering light, was me, or something that looked like me, but it wasn't human. Its body was twisted, elongated in ways that defied logic. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, sharp teeth glinting like razors in the flickering glow. The eyes, my eyes, were black pits, empty and soulless, but they seemed to see right through me. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were rooted to the floor. It stepped closer, its movements unnatural, like a puppet being jerked around by invisible strings. Its hands, bony, skeletal things, reached out toward me. "No," I whispered, barely audible over the deafening buzz that now filled the room. The thing tilted its head, its grin widening further, splitting its face like a cracked mask. "You're late," it hissed, the voice like shards of glass scraping against my ears. "You failed." The countdown hit 0. The lights exploded into darkness and the hum stopped abruptly. Silence. Deafening, suffocating silence. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. My heartbeat was the only sound left, pounding in my ears like a frantic drumbeat. And then, nothing. The calendar stares back at me, glowing faintly on the dim screen. A new entry. Another deadline. Another invisible deadline. The date is tomorrow. I should feel something, panic, dread, maybe even anger. But instead, there's nothing. Just a hollow numbness spreading through me, wrapping around my mind like a fog. No one found me. They didn't even look, did they? Not for me, not for the others. The office went on as if we were never there, our desks quietly reassigned, our names erased from the system. But I'm still here. I can feel it. I can hear it, humming softly in the silence around me. The whisper of the deadline pulling at the edges of my thoughts. It's not a choice. It never was. The air feels colder now, pressing against my skin like icy fingers. Shadows shift around me, stretching, twisting, curling into shapes I don't want to recognize. The countdown hasn't started yet, but I know it will. I close my eyes, but the darkness only makes it worse. I'm part of it now, whatever it is, and it's calling me again. My breath is shallow, my heart barely beating. I lean back in the chair that isn't mine, staring at the screen. The clock in the corner ticks forward, second by second, marking the time I have left. It's not over. It will never be over. The crying cubicle. The office at night feels like a different world. Have you ever stayed late, long after everyone else has left? The hum of the fluorescent lights becomes deafening, and the shadows stretch farther than they should. That's how it felt last Thursday, when I found myself alone at Weston and Cole, the weight of quarterly reports keeping me tethered to my desk. It should have been a routine late night, just me and the deadlines. But something was off. The air felt heavier, almost like the building itself was holding its breath. I remember the first sound distinctly, a soft creak, like a chair shifting in an empty room. My fingers paused mid-typing, and I turned toward the open floor of cubicles. Nothing moved, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then it started. Faint at first, like a distant whisper carried on the air. Crying. Low, broken sobs that sent a shiver crawling up my spine. I've been with Weston and Cole for 3 years. It's your standard corporate grind, endless rows of beige cubicles, the faint smell of stale coffee clinging to the air, and motivational posters plastered on the walls with phrases like, "Success is a journey." Nights like this, I usually take comfort in the silence, but not this time. The sound of those sobs had a weight to them, a rawness that made the emptiness around me feel oppressive. There's one cubicle in the office that everyone avoids, even in the busiest hours of the day. Claire's cubicle. It's a small space tucked into the far corner, unremarkable in every way except for the stories attached to it. 5 years ago, Claire had a heart attack right there at her desk. She'd been overworked and unnoticed until it was too late. Now, people whispered that her spirit lingered, her presence felt in the flicker of a light or the cold draft that sometimes swept through the office. I always thought it was just gossip. Until that night, the crying grew louder. My heart thudded in my chest as I stood, each step toward the source feeling heavier than the last. Claire's cubicle came into view, and for a moment I hesitated. The desk looked ordinary, but something about it felt wrong. The papers scattered across it were slightly yellowed, like they'd been left untouched for years. A photo frame sat face down as if someone had deliberately hidden it. The air around the cubicle was colder than the rest of the office, enough to make my breath fog slightly in the light. And then I saw it. The chair spun slowly, almost lazily, as if someone had just stood up. I froze, my throat tightening as I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe the air conditioning. Maybe I'd bumped the desk. But deep down, I knew better. The sobbing wasn't coming from somewhere far away. It was right there, surrounding me. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that now. But in that moment, I couldn't stop myself. My fingers reached for the photo frame, turning it upright. The woman in the photo, Claire, I assumed, smiled warmly, her eyes bright and full of life. It was such a stark contrast to the oppressive feeling in the room that it made my stomach churn. That's when the stapler fell. A sharp clatter that broke the heavy silence and sent my heart racing. It was followed by a sound, shuffling footsteps, slow and deliberate. I ran. I didn't grab my bag or shut down my computer. I didn't even look back. My only thought was to get out, to put as much distance as I could between me and whatever was in that cubicle. At home, the silence felt different. It wasn't comforting anymore. The sobbing stayed with me, echoing in my head no matter how much I tried to convince myself it was just stress. I told myself it wasn't real, that my imagination was playing tricks on me. But the next night I heard it again. This time it wasn't at the office. It was in my apartment. It started faintly, like it was coming from another room. I sat frozen on my couch, every muscle in my body tensed as I listened. The crying grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be coming from all around me. My breath came in shallow gasps as I glanced around, half expecting to see Claire standing in the shadows. But she wasn't there. Not exactly. Instead, her face stared back at me from every reflective surface. The microwave door, the window, even the black screen of my TV. Her eyes were filled with tears, her expression pleading, but for what, I couldn't tell. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go back. I had to fix whatever I'd done. The office felt different that night, more oppressive than before. Every step toward Claire's cubicle felt like wading through quicksand. The crying was louder now, a chorus of voices echoing through the empty space. My hands trembled as I reached for the photo frame, placing it back exactly as I'd found it. For a moment, the sobbing stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. Then I saw her. Her reflection appeared in the glass of the photo frame, her tear-streaked face twisted with anger. Her lips moved, and though her voice was barely a whisper, the words struck me like a physical blow. "It's not me, it's you. You've taken my place." I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. The office wasn't empty anymore. Every cubicle was occupied, shadowy figures hunched over desks, their sobs filling the air. I looked toward my own desk and my stomach dropped. My chair was spinning slowly, waiting for me. And then I understood. I wasn't just being haunted. I was becoming one of them. As I sank into the chair, the sobbing around me faded, replaced by the sound of my own. Now I'm here, working late, alone, just like Claire. The coworker's doppelganger. You know, offices aren't supposed to be creepy. They're sterile, mundane, a place for emails and coffee breaks, not chills running down your spine. But last night, I learned just how wrong that assumption can be. I learned that even the most ordinary spaces can hide the extraordinary and the terrifying. It started around 7 p.m. Most of my coworkers had already left for the day. The air in the office had that end-of-day heaviness, stale coffee, printer ink, and a lingering sense of exhaustion. My desk's small lamp cast a weak yellow glow, barely cutting through the growing shadows. I was used to working late, but this night would be different. I heard a faint knock in the distance. Jessica. She was walking down the hallway toward the break room. Except I could swear I'd just seen her leave the building 15 minutes ago. I even waved goodbye to her at the elevator. Jessica and I aren't exactly close, but we've worked together for 2 years. She's one of those people who's always perfectly put together. Sharp suits, immaculate makeup, not a hair out of place. I've always admired her professionalism, maybe even envied it a little. Me, I'm the opposite. Always frazzled, always a coffee stain on my shirt. The office felt different that night, quieter. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. I told myself I was imagining things. Stress, fatigue, too much caffeine, it all messes with your head. I decided to check the break room. Maybe Jessica had forgotten something and come back. But as I rounded the corner, I froze. Jessica was there, standing by the fridge, her back to me. She wasn't moving, just standing. Something about her posture seemed off, too rigid. "Jessica!" I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the empty office. She didn't respond. Slowly, I stepped closer. The air felt heavier with each step, like walking underwater. That's when I heard it. It wasn't coming from her. It was coming from everywhere. A faint whisper, indecipherable but chilling, pressing against my skin and slithering into my ears. My instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but my legs refused to move. Jessica's head tilted unnaturally, almost robotic. Her reflection in the nearby microwave door looked slightly delayed, moving just a fraction of a second too late. Her reflection, it wasn't right. It blinked when she didn't. It smiled when her face stayed still. I couldn't shake the image from my mind. What was that thing? Was it Jessica? Or something pretending to be her? Back at my desk, I frantically typed, trying to distract myself. The faint clicks of the keyboard were drowned out by the distant hum of the HVAC system, and then a sudden sharp knock on glass. I looked up, and there she was again, at the glass door to the office, staring in at me. Except Jessica doesn't wear red lipstick, and her smile, it was too wide, too perfect. When I blinked, she was gone. The office grew colder, the shadows deeper. I packed my things and left, practically running to the elevator. But as the doors closed, I saw her again, standing in my cubicle, watching me leave. And then I realized Jessica was the one who'd told me goodnight. She couldn't be in the office. Could she? The next day, I returned to the office, determined to confront Jessica. I had to know. Maybe I was losing my mind, or maybe there was an explanation. I found her at her desk, calm as ever, typing away. Jessica looked normal at first, but subtle details seemed off, her skin too smooth, her eyes too bright. I asked her about last night. She laughed it off, said she'd gone straight home after work. But as she spoke, I noticed something. Her reflection in her computer screen didn't match her movements. It was smiling at me, even though her face wasn't. The whisper returned, louder this time, indecipherable words pressing into my ears. Her reflection turned to face me fully, even as she kept typing. Its eyes locked onto mine, and I swear it mouthed the words, "You're next." The office lights flickered, and my own reflection in a nearby glass surface started to smile unnaturally. My breath hitched. The whispers grew louder, and as I backed away, the shadows seemed to close in. And then silence. Just my own panicked breathing and the echo of those haunting words. The endless Zoom call. Working remotely was a dream. No commute, no annoying coworkers at my desk, no awkward office small talk. Just me, my laptop, and a steady paycheck. But sometimes the isolation gets to you. The silence of an empty apartment. The way time blurs together. The way a simple Zoom call can become something unnatural. And now, I don't know if I ever left. The email came at 11:45 p.m. Midnight strategy sync, attendance mandatory. I frowned. Midnight meetings weren't normal, but Alan, my manager, was a workaholic with no sense of boundaries. With a sigh, I clicked the link. The Zoom window loaded, filling with familiar faces. Mark from HR looking half asleep. Sophie from marketing sipping coffee. Chris, the guy who never unmutes his mic. And a few others I barely recognized. Then I saw it. An extra participant. Their name read, unknown. A slow, crawling unease settled in my gut. Who invited the guest? I typed in the chat. No one responded. Alan kept talking, his face illuminated by the cold glow of his monitor. No one even glanced at the unknown participant. It was like they did not see them, but they were there. I could see them. Still, unmoving. Their video feed was grainy dark, not frozen but not moving either. And yet their eyes were. I tried to focus, but something felt off. The sound was slightly distorted. Sophie was talking, but her lips and voice did not sync. My screen glitched just for a second, but when it stabilized, my stomach twisted. The unknown participant had moved just a little. A slight tilt of the head, I shivered. Hadn't they been staring straight ahead? Another flicker. The unknown participant was now smiling. A wrong kind of smile, too wide, too many teeth. I swallowed hard and glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. That was not right. We had been in the meeting for at least 20 minutes, yet time hadn't changed. I grabbed my phone. Dead. Panic scratched at the edges of my mind. I moved my cursor toward the leave meeting button. It was gone. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, clicking randomly. Nothing worked, no escape. The chat window flickered. A new message appeared. Unknown, you should have left earlier. My breath hitched. The video feeds of my coworkers distorted, their faces warping, too long, too sharp, too wrong. Their eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. A glitch. It had to be a glitch. I slammed my laptop shut. The screen stayed on. My video feed was still active, and in my webcam's preview, I saw something behind me. A dark figure, tall, unmoving, watching. I turned my head slowly. My chair creaked. Nothing. I exhaled shakily and turned back to my screen. The unknown participant was closer now, not just on the screen in my room. My chest tightened as something cold brushed my shoulder. Not air, not a draft, something solid. A whisper crawled through my speakers. You're already here. The lights flickered. My laptop screen stretched and warped like reality itself was bending. I clawed at my desk, breath shallow. The chat box blinked again. Unknown, next participant joining, and then a knock at my door. I did not move. I could not move. The knocking came again. Slow, deliberate. I was on the 4th floor. There should not be anyone at my door. On screen, my coworkers were still in the meeting. Frozen, watching, then the door creaked open. I snapped my head around, darkness. A shape stood in the doorway, its head tilted the same way Unknown had tilted theirs. A guttural, crackling sound filled my speakers. The figure stepped forward, and my Zoom feed changed. It was no longer showing my face. It was showing the back of my head. My stomach dropped. I was not facing the screen anymore, but I could still see myself on it. I gasped, whipping around, and saw nothing. I was not in my chair. The chat box flickered one last time. Unknown, welcome to the meeting. The leave meeting button reappeared. I clicked it frantically. The screen went black. Silence. Morning light streamed through my curtains when I opened my eyes. I was in bed. My laptop was gone. My phone sat on my nightstand, fully charged. I checked the time. 7:00 a.m. Had I imagined it? A nightmare? Heart pounding, I checked my emails, a new notification. Meeting reminder, midnight strategy sync, attendance mandatory. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry. The meeting had never ended. It was waiting for me, still waiting. The haunted email chain. It started with a simple click, just another email in the middle of a late-night work session. I thought nothing of it. I deleted it just like all the others. But this one, it didn't go away. It stayed, changed, and suddenly it knew things about me, things no one could possibly know. I used to laugh at the idea of cursed emails, the ones that say, forward this or else. But now I know better. The or else is real. And once the email finds you, you can never really delete it. You can never really escape it. It's coming. And there's nowhere left to run. My name is Melissa. I'm just an ordinary office worker, a graphic designer for a small agency downtown. My life is mostly routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. No real drama, no supernatural mysteries. I don't believe in ghost stories, not even for a second. The world is logical, understandable, and predictable. I know what I'm dealing with every day, and that's how I like it. It was a Thursday night, around 11:13 p.m. My apartment was quiet, dimly lit only by the faint glow of my computer screen. I had been working for hours, my eyes glued to the monitor, barely noticing the time pass by. My desk was a mess, empty coffee cups, scattered design notes, a half-eaten sandwich that I'd forgotten about. The gentle hum of the air conditioning provided a constant backdrop, like white noise. I was deep into a new project, the kind that makes you forget about the outside world. That's when I saw it. A new email notification popped up on the bottom right corner of my screen. I clicked on it, thinking it was probably another spam message or maybe a promotional email I had signed up for ages ago. But when the subject line appeared, my finger hesitated. Forward this email or suffer the consequences. I almost laughed. Another one of those stupid chain letters. I rolled my eyes. People still sent these things. I mean, come on, how gullible can you be? I opened it just to see what kind of nonsense it contained. Sure enough, the message was exactly what I expected. Forward this email to 5 people within 1 minute or something bad will happen to you. I snorted, about to delete it. But then something caught my eye. There was a weird detail in the email that didn't make sense. It had my name on it. It seemed like a coincidence at first, maybe a personalization tactic used by spammers. But then I noticed something even stranger. It had my apartment number. I leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. This was too specific. Was this a joke? Who would go to the trouble of messing with me like this? I clicked the delete button, dismissing it as nothing more than a glitch, but nothing happened. The email stayed in my inbox, stubborn as ever. I clicked again. Nothing. There was a strange, high-pitched beep, like the sound of an error code. I felt my heart race, my fingers freezing over the keyboard. Was it some kind of computer virus? Then, without warning, the subject line changed. You were warned. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't normal. My skin prickled, a chill running down my spine. This was just wrong. I tried to laugh it off, but it felt like something was watching me from behind the screen. I shook my head, willing myself to calm down. It was probably just some prank from one of my colleagues. They knew I didn't believe in this stuff. I checked the clock. It was late, but there was no way I was going to bed with this ridiculous email sitting in my inbox. So I clicked it open again. The message had changed. It was short, just a few lines, but they were enough to make my blood run cold. Forward this email to 5 people within 1 minute or someone will visit you. I stared at it. What kind of sick joke was this? The air around me suddenly felt heavier, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I stood up and walked to the door, telling myself it was just a prank, maybe even a harmless one. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. I felt a strange relief, but it didn't last long. As I turned back to my desk, I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock, knock, knock at the door. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't explain it, but something felt off. I rushed back to my computer, but when I sat down, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The email had replied to itself. Too late. The words appeared on my screen, their robotic, distorted whisper somehow seeping through the quiet of my apartment. I was beginning to panic. This was no longer just a prank. Something was wrong. Something was really wrong. I could hear the knocking again, but this time it was coming from my screen. I stood up in a panic, trying to shake the feeling of dread that was slowly creeping into my body. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, like something or someone was trying to break through the screen. I checked the peephole. The hallway was still empty. When I turned back around, the screen flickered. And that's when I saw it, a face. At first, it was just a blur, but then it grew sharper, clearer. Eyes too many, a mouth that didn't move right. And then it was closer, too close, too real. I blinked, and the figure was suddenly standing right in front of me. I could almost feel its cold, breathless presence. My fingers fumbled over the keyboard, but every time I tried to click away from the screen, it wouldn't work. I could hear the breath of the figure, faint and rasping, but unmistakable. I needed to get out. I ran for the door, not caring about anything. My phone, my keys, nothing. I just needed to get away from whatever this was. I reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked. I tried again, harder this time, but still nothing. I could hear the figure behind me, its breath growing louder, its presence closing in on me. My heartbeat was deafening in my ears. Then the screen flickered again. The email had a new message. "You can't unsend it." I don't remember much after that. I ran. I don't know how far I got, but I ended up curled in a corner, staring at the screen like it was the only thing that mattered anymore. The knocking had stopped. The figure was gone, but the email, it was still there. I don't know how long I stayed like that. The next morning, my coworker, Mary Kay, found me. She knocked on my door, but when I didn't answer, she came in and found me, sitting in front of my computer, blank and unresponsive. He laughed. "Jesus, Melissa, you look like a zombie. You okay?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell someone about an email that followed you, an email that changed, an email that knew you? Mary Kay didn't seem to take me seriously. She shrugged and walked away, probably thinking I had just pulled an all-nighter and gone a little insane. But I knew better. It wasn't just a stupid email. It wasn't just a prank. I couldn't explain it. I just knew. That night, I went out with some of the team to grab drinks. I wasn't in the mood to talk about the email, but I didn't want to be alone either. As we sat down at the bar, the conversation naturally drifted to some of the weird things that had happened around the office. One of the designers, Sarah, mentioned something about a strange email chain she had received a while back. "Oh, I got one of those cursed email things last month," she laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "I sent it to 5 people just to be safe, though. It's all just a joke, you know. Nothing happened." I felt a chill run down my spine. She had received the same email. But she wasn't scared. She was laughing. I didn't know what to think anymore. Could this be real? Or was I just going crazy? I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded along, trying to act like everything was fine. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The productivity cult. There's a certain kind of suffocating monotony in office life. You know the feeling, the gray walls, the hum of fluorescent lights, the low murmur of keyboards and murmurs from coworkers too tired to care about much beyond the screen in front of them. That's how it was for me, and I was fine with it. I'm Bridget Jones. 3 years ago, I landed my dream job at Apex Corp. It was the kind of company people envied, the kind where the benefits were generous, the perks endless, and the office itself looked like something out of a sleek tech company's fantasy. I worked my ass off to get here, and for a while it was everything I wanted. The first few months felt like a breeze, new projects, new faces, fresh opportunities. I made a name for myself quickly, and despite the endless deadlines and the ever-looming pressure to perform, I felt like I was on top of it all. I was the kind of person who found comfort in productivity. Numbers on a spreadsheet were something I could control. Reports were tangible. Tasks were solvable. But then something started to shift. It began with a strange email, an invite, they called it. The email was simple, nothing extraordinary about it except that it carried an odd, unsettling message. "Join the productivity challenge. Unlock your full potential." At first, I ignored it. Just another corporate gimmick, I thought. But as days went by, the ritual started to take root in the office, like a quiet virus spreading through the walls. People were becoming obsessed. And as much as I hated to admit it, I started to feel the pull too. Now, looking back, I don't know if it was the job, the rituals, or the very idea of being someone who couldn't keep up that did it. But I found myself spiraling into something I couldn't control. The strange atmosphere, the missing coworkers, and the eerie chants echoing through the hallways, it all started with that email. And that was my first mistake. When I opened the email, it didn't seem like much. Just another piece of corporate fluff. Boost your efficiency. Become the best version of yourself. But then I noticed the odd subject line, join the productivity challenge. Below that, a quick bullet list of instructions, simple, harmless things at first. Take time for self-reflection. Perform your productivity rituals. Track your personal growth. The last line, though, made my stomach churn. Failure to participate will be considered a lack of commitment to the team. I stared at the words for longer than I should have, my mind racing. My stomach twisted into knots. I didn't think much about it at first. I'd been through enough corporate programs to know they all followed the same script, spend a few days jumping through hoops, then forget about it. But somehow, this felt different. There was a tone in the email that I couldn't quite place. An urgency. A strange pull. I clicked the delete button without thinking much of it, but as my finger hovered over the mouse, I noticed the subject line change. It was the kind of thing that makes your blood run cold. You are invited to unlock your full potential. I blinked. I clicked delete again. The email stayed. Probably some glitch, I muttered, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something had changed, and I was already caught in it. That's when I started hearing the whispers. They weren't loud, but they were there. A voice, distant, like a computer-generated murmur. Join us, unlock your potential. It wasn't real, I told myself. Just my imagination. But deep down, I knew I was already in too deep. And the ritual, that was just the beginning. The next morning, everything felt off. I had barely stepped into the office when something hit me, the atmosphere. It was like the air had thickened overnight, as if the walls had absorbed all the exhaustion, the stress, and the whispers from the previous day. It felt different. Heavier. My feet dragged as I made my way to my desk, the usual rhythm of the office unusually subdued. People were quietly typing away at their computers, but something about their movements, their silence, felt forced. As I walked past the elevator, something caught my eye, a large, glossy sign hanging above it. The words on it stood out in stark, sterile lettering. Productivity rituals, starting today, mandatory for all employees. A tight knot formed in my stomach. I stopped dead in my tracks, the noise of the office around me fading to a low hum. What did that even mean? I'd overheard whispers about the rituals in the break room yesterday, but I'd shrugged it off. It was probably some corporate gimmick to keep us all engaged, right? Boost morale or whatever. But the sign above the elevator, it felt different now. More official. I continued to my desk, but my hands suddenly felt clammy. My fingers hovered over the mouse, frozen for a moment as I stared at the blinking cursor on the screen in front of me. Focus, Bridget, I told myself. It's just another one of their nonsense initiatives. But it wasn't just another initiative. By 3 p.m., I was becoming more curious than ever about these rituals. What were they really? And why had the company made such a big deal about them? Before I could answer my own questions, a calendar notification popped up on my screen. Productivity ritual at 4 p.m. Don't forget. I stared at it for a long moment, the soft click of the mouse as I moved it out of the way somehow loud in the otherwise quiet office. The message lingered on the screen, as if it was staring back at me, daring me to ignore it. I couldn't. A few minutes before 4, I noticed the lights flicker, just once, but it was enough to catch my attention. A soft buzz filled the room before they returned to normal. I looked around, half expecting to see someone else react, but everyone seemed absorbed in their work. I stood up. My legs felt heavier than usual, as though my body was reluctant to move. The ritual was being held in the conference room, so I hesitated for a moment before heading that way, each step echoing in the hollow silence of the hallway. The atmosphere was thick, almost oppressive, like the walls were closing in with each passing second. When I reached the door, I paused and took a deep breath. This is just a stupid office thing, I reassured myself. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the lights giving off a soft, flickering glow. There were several colleagues already seated in a circle. Their faces were expressionless, blank, as if they were waiting for something. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. A projector screen hung at the front of the room, the simple message, "Unlock your full potential," glaring at us in large, bold letters. At the front of the room stood Greg, our manager. His face was stern, almost cold, and his posture was rigid. He wasn't smiling. There was no warmth in his expression, only a sense of expectation. "All right, everyone," Greg said, his voice flat and monotone as if he'd rehearsed this speech 100 times. "Stand up and repeat after me." I stood. The other employees around me stood as well, and for some reason I felt like I didn't have a choice. "I am productive." Greg's voice echoed in the quiet room. "I am productive," we all said in unison. "I am focused. I am focused. I am efficient. I am efficient." I followed along, my voice shaky at first, unsure if I should even be doing this. I wasn't the only one feeling this way. Several of my coworkers exchanged glances, their unease palpable in the stillness. But none of us spoke. And then something strange happened. As I repeated the words, I felt it. A rush, a sharp, sudden jolt of energy coursing through my body like electricity sparking from my fingertips to my toes. It wasn't a shock, though. It was almost euphoric, like a burst of adrenaline that made my heart race in excitement. I couldn't help it. My lips curled into a smile. My shoulders relaxed. My fingers tingled. This isn't so bad, I thought, the rush almost overwhelming. I felt invincible, like I could conquer anything. The ritual was working. But then in the middle of it all, I started to notice the others. Their faces. They were smiling, but not just smiling. They were grinning in a way that felt wrong. Their eyes were wide, unblinking. The smiles were too bright, too forced. There was something off about the way their faces twisted in unnatural joy. The energy, once euphoric, now felt hollow. I glanced around, my pulse quickening. Greg was still standing in front of us, guiding us through the chant. His eyes were locked on me, and I could see something darker in them, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. When the ritual ended, the air in the room seemed to shift again. It was like a weight had lifted, but it wasn't a comforting lift. It was like something had been stripped away, leaving us all feeling exposed. Greg nodded in approval, his smile wide and tight. "Return to your desks. You'll find yourself more productive than ever." I didn't move right away. I just stood there, staring at the others. They were all filing out of the room, but they didn't look like the same people anymore. The smiles hadn't faded. Their steps were quicker, more sure of themselves. I followed them back to my desk, my body still buzzing with that strange energy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But as I sat down and glanced at my screen, I felt the pull again, the compulsion to work. It was overwhelming. The desire to achieve was all-consuming. I couldn't help it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type, ready to do anything to feel that surge of energy again. The following days felt like I was trapped in a whirlwind of heightened energy, like a constant buzz that had taken over my mind and body. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this, alive. It was almost like a fog had lifted, and everything became sharper, clearer. Tasks that usually dragged on felt effortless now. I breezed through them, completing them faster than I ever thought possible, each one feeling more satisfying than the last. My brain seemed to be firing on all cylinders, ideas pouring out in streams, solutions popping into my head as if they'd always been there, waiting for me to notice them. I remember the hum of my keyboard beneath my fingers, the constant click-clack as I typed away, almost rhythmic. The office around me was a blur, the soft murmur of my coworkers' voices mixing with the gentle hum of the fluorescent lights above. But even though I was getting things done like I never had before, something felt off. The more I achieved, the more distant I felt from everyone else. I could see the way they looked at me, at least the few who still looked at me. It wasn't the same. It was like I was slowly becoming something they couldn't understand. And they, too, were changing. Amanda, for one. She used to be so grounded, always practical, always sensible. But now she was different. Every time I passed her desk, I noticed her talking to Greg in hushed tones. Her voice, always so measured before, was now breathy, like she was floating on some kind of high. And her smile, it was too wide, stretched unnaturally across her face. It wasn't just a smile. It was empty, I saw her whispering to him one afternoon, her words almost lost in the buzz of the office. "I feel unstoppable," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, but the confidence in it was undeniable. There was an almost childlike excitement in her eyes. "The rituals are unlocking something in me." I felt a pang in my chest, but I didn't have time to figure it out. Before I could react, Amanda turned to me, her smile gleaming brighter, more intense than before. "You should try it, Bridget," she said, her voice sweet and persuasive. "It's amazing. The next level of the ritual, it's incredible." I swallowed, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Something about the way she said it didn't sound like her anymore. It sounded like she was reading from a script, like a broken record stuck on repeat. I shook my head, my hands gripping the edge of my desk to steady myself. "No thanks, I'm good," I muttered, not looking her in the eye. The strange look in her eyes flickered for just a second, a flash of something darker, but she quickly covered it with another smile, as though the light had returned to her eyes. She didn't push further, but the air between us had shifted. It was as if she'd just offered me a taste of something dangerous, and I had rejected it without even knowing the consequences. I couldn't shake the unease that settled deep in my stomach. As I turned away, I noticed the others, their faces blank, their eyes vacant, glued to their screens but somehow disconnected. It was like they were all in a trance, following the rhythm of their work but no longer fully there. The energy I felt was unlike anything I had ever experienced but theirs. It was empty, hollow. They were chasing something. But what? It wasn't the first time I had seen it. At lunch that day, I had sat next to Jim, who had been a reliable, no-nonsense guy. But even he had changed. He'd become distant, almost robotic. He barely even looked at me when I spoke to him. His eyes were fixed on his phone as if he was awaiting something. The whole time, he didn't even acknowledge me. When I asked about his day, his response was robotic, and his smile, that smile, it didn't even reach his eyes. What was happening to all of us? What was happening to me? A week had passed since Amanda had been absent. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd probably just taken some time off, right? But as the days wore on, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. I glanced over at her empty desk as I passed by, the chair pushed back slightly, her cup of coffee sitting untouched, still cold. I tried asking around, casually at first, but no one seemed to have seen her. "Where, Amanda?" I asked Rachel one afternoon in the break room. She looked up at me with wide eyes and a nervous laugh. "You didn't hear, she, advanced to the next level." "Next level?" I frowned, not understanding what she meant. "Yeah," Rachel said, looking down at her phone like she was trying to avoid my gaze. "She's focusing on her personal development, with the rituals and all." The air in the break room suddenly felt thick, like I had just stepped into something heavy. I didn't press Rachel for more, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Amanda's absence wasn't a simple vacation. The next day, in a meeting that felt like it stretched for hours, Greg casually dropped the bombshell, his voice smooth and almost rehearsed. "Amanda has advanced to the next level of the rituals," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room, his smile wide but empty. "She'll be taking a leave of absence to focus on her personal development. It's a necessary step for those who wish to fully unlock their potential." His words echoed in my ears as the room fell silent. I could feel the tension building, thick and suffocating. Something about the way he said it, the casual tone, sent a chill crawling down my spine. It didn't sound like she was taking time off to better herself. It sounded more like she was being removed. My fingers gripped the edge of my chair tightly as I stared at the conference table, trying to keep my focus. But the weight of Greg's words gnawed at me, relentless and cold. My mind raced, the air around me thickening, pressing in. The meeting finally ended, but I could barely process the rest of the day. My thoughts kept spiraling back to Amanda. Where had she gone? What had happened to her? As the afternoon wore on, I tried to push it from my mind, focusing on my tasks. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. The usual hum of the office felt distant, as though the walls were closing in on me, pressing down with increasing pressure. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked through emails, the soft clicking of my mouse barely audible against the low buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. And then it happened. A sudden ping. I barely had time to react as the email notification flashed across my screen. Do not ignore the ritual. To ignore is to fail. You have been warned. My heart skipped a beat. My mouth went dry. The words on the screen seemed to burn into my mind, their meaning heavy and ominous. The message felt like a direct warning, a threat that carried weight beyond the simple phrasing. I froze. My hand hovered over the mouse, but I couldn't bring myself to click away. A cold sweat began to bead on the back of my neck as the room around me seemed to shrink, the air thick with tension. The usual sounds, the murmur of conversations, the clicking of keyboards, faded into the background. It felt like everything was closing in on me. The walls, the lights, even the sound of my own breathing. It was all too much. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach, like an anchor pulling me deeper into something dark and unknown. My skin crawled. My mind screamed at me to do something, but I was frozen, trapped in this feeling. The sensation of being watched crept into my mind, slow and insidious. I glanced over my shoulder, but the office was just as empty as it had been a moment ago. No one was there, no one was watching, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was there, watching, waiting. I quickly minimized the email, but the words, the warning clung to the back of my mind like a heavy fog. The eerie sensation didn't leave. It lingered, suffocating and oppressive. I had to do something. I didn't know what yet, but something had to be done. I couldn't ignore this, not anymore. Not after Amanda. The days blurred into one another, each one a seamless continuation of the last, like I was trapped in an endless loop. The rituals never stopped. Every hour, every day, it felt like there was more pressure to participate, to commit, to surrender. At first, I thought I could power through it. But the weight of it, the chanting, the repetitive phrases, the smiles that had become hollow masks was suffocating. The office was changing, and not in the way that they promised. It was subtle at first. People were disappearing. One by one, colleagues who had been around for years were just gone. I couldn't bring myself to ask where they went. Not because I didn't care, but because the looks in their eyes, the way they started whispering in the break room, made me uneasy. Their smiles were wrong. Too wide, too eager, like they were all part of something I wasn't in on. And I had to get out. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The pressure, the chanting, the rituals, it was all getting worse. Each day felt heavier than the last. The walls of this place were closing in, and I could barely breathe. I stood by my desk, my fingers trembling on the keyboard, staring at my screen with unseeing eyes. The hum of the fluorescent lights above me seemed louder today, more oppressive, like they were buzzing directly in my skull. I felt trapped, no, more than trapped. I felt like I was suffocating in a room that was supposed to be an office. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and rushed for the door. It was automatic, my movements robotic as I went for the exit. I had to get out. But when I reached the lobby, the doors wouldn't open. My heart skipped a beat. I reached for my keycard, swiping it against the scanner, but nothing happened. The screen blinked red, taunting me. I tried again, and again. Panic bubbled up inside me, my chest tightening, breath coming faster. This had to be a mistake. It couldn't be happening. Please, I muttered under my breath, swiping again, but the doors remained stubbornly locked. I took a step back, my eyes darting to the security desk, but no one was there. The entire office felt empty, quiet, too quiet. And then from down the hall, I heard it, a sound I couldn't ignore, the unmistakable rhythm of chanting, low, hypnotic, and echoing through the corridors. Unlock your full potential, they murmured in unison. You are part of something greater. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last. The chant was coming from the conference room. I could hear it clearly despite the distance. My feet moved on their own accord, pulling me toward the sound, my stomach a pit of dread. I reached the conference room, my hands shaking as I tried to turn the knob, but the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. Of course it was. I shoved harder, pushing my shoulder against the door with all the force I had, but it wouldn't open. The chanting grew louder, more intense, and I could feel the vibrations in my chest, deep and unsettling. Please, just let me out of here, I whispered to myself, panic rising like bile in my throat. And that's when I felt it. A hand on my arm pulling me back. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat, only to meet the eyes of Amanda. But it wasn't the Amanda I remembered. Her eyes were wide, wild, almost feverish. There was a strange, unnatural glow to them, like they weren't even hers anymore. She was smiling too wide, stretching unnaturally across her face like it was carved there. Her teeth were too white, too sharp. The Amanda I knew was gone, replaced by something else. "You can't leave now, Bridget," she said, her voice smooth but cold, like she had been rehearsing the words for days. "We're all part of it, the cult of productivity. You'll see. You'll understand soon enough." I tried to pull away, but her grip on my arm was ironclad, and before I knew it, I was being dragged into the conference room. "Let me go!" I screamed, my voice cracking. But Amanda didn't listen. She just kept smiling, pulling me forward, and with a sudden jolt, the door slammed shut behind me. The chanting grew louder, all-consuming, a steady hum of voices chanting in perfect unison. It was all around me now, everywhere. I tried to push Amanda away, but she was too strong, too caught up in whatever madness had taken hold of her. I turned to look around the room, my breath shallow, my vision blurring. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the projector screen at the far end, displaying the same phrase that had haunted me for days. "Unlock your full potential." I could feel my heart in my throat, a choking, painful knot of fear. Something was terribly wrong. These people, my coworkers, were no longer who they had been. They were different. The chant reached a crescendo, and in that moment I understood. This wasn't just about rituals. This was about control, about power, about something far darker than I could have ever imagined. And I was in too deep to escape. The air in the conference room felt suffocating, thick with tension. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat like a drum, so loud it drowned out the chanting that had become a constant buzz in my ears. I couldn't escape it. No matter how hard I tried, the sound was everywhere, growing louder, pressing in on me like it was inside my head. And then in the center of the room, I saw him. Greg, his eyes, cold, empty, lifeless, locked onto me with a gaze that made my stomach drop. He wasn't the man I knew anymore. There was nothing human left in him, just a puppet, a vessel for something far darker. Around him, my coworkers, people I had once shared laughs with in the break room, were gathered in a circle, their faces glowing, their eyes wide with fervor. Their smiles were too wide, their lips stretched unnaturally, like they were being controlled by some unseen force. They weren't people anymore, not in any way that mattered. They were lost. The chanting reverberated through the room. I felt it in my bones, in my skin, in every part of me. The words blurred together, merging into a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to get louder and louder with each passing second. "Unlock your full potential," they whispered over and over like a mantra, a prayer. I could feel my chest tightening, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was dizzy, disoriented. The room seemed to sway around me as if the walls were closing in, pressing against me. "You must join us, Bridget." Greg's voice broke through the chaos, flat and unfeeling, like a knife slicing through the tension. His words didn't carry the same warmth they used to. There was nothing left behind his eyes now but emptiness. "Or you'll become like them, like the others who failed." He gestured to the far corner of the room, where someone lay motionless on the floor. My eyes locked on the figure, my breath hitching in my throat as I saw their face. Twisted in agony, frozen in a silent scream that was too much for me to bear. A chill ran down my spine. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, choking me, suffocating me. The chanting grew louder, the voices surrounding me now, drowning out all rational thought. My pulse was a drumbeat, pounding in my ears. I couldn't stay. I couldn't. With everything in me, I pushed through the crowd of chanting, mindless bodies. The hands of my coworkers reached for me, but I pulled away, my breath ragged, eyes wide with fear. I didn't care if they were my friends once. They weren't anymore. They had given themselves over to this cult, to this twisted purpose, and there was no turning back for them. I didn't stop running. My legs burned, my breath ragged. The only sound I could hear now was the rush of air in my ears, my feet pounding against the floor. I had to get out. I had to escape before it was too late. I pushed open the doors, stumbling out into the fresh air. My lungs burned as I gasped for breath. The coolness of the outside whirled a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat inside. But the relief didn't last. As I turned back, my eyes locked onto the building behind me, and what I saw made my blood run cold. They were there, all of them. The entire cult standing at the windows. Their eyes locked onto mine, glowing with that same eerie fervor. They weren't just watching me. They were waiting, watching, waiting. as if they were expecting something, and in that moment I knew there was no escaping them, not now, not ever. I had tried to outrun them, but they were always going to be there, just beyond my reach, watching me, waiting, always waiting. As always, thanks for listening. Sleep tight, shadows.